Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Maria Fernanda Quesada. For most people, family is the most important aspect of life. However, finding a trustworthy partner who can be the ideal husband and father is not always easy. Infatuation can cloud judgment, leading some individuals to commit to unsuitable partners, which can sometimes turn life into a nightmare. Maria Fernanda Quesada lived in La Gloria, Nueva Costa Rica. Born in 1994, she was a kind and beautiful girl. She was a strong and independent woman with dreams of becoming a mother. She wasn't overly focused on her career. Instead, she valued the warmth and comfort of a family. She wished for siblings, but was her parents' only child. Her family is close-knit and loving, often held up as a model for other families. Her parents provided her with a comfortable home and a good education, which is still not accessible to everyone in Costa Rica. The environment there is not as favorable as in many other Latin American countries. Maria had a great relationship with her family, and she was especially close to her maternal aunt. They were similar in age, shared experiences, supported one another, and regularly met and communicated. Maria shared all her secrets with her aunt, and they felt like best friends. People recognized Maria as a friendly and outgoing person who could easily connect with strangers, which helped her make many friends. She fell in love for the first time at 19, believing it was a genuine feeling that would lead to happiness, a family, children, and a cozy cottage by the sea. Unfortunately, the reality was different. Her boyfriend took advantage of her and left when he became interested in someone else. To make matters worse, Maria discovered she was pregnant at that time. 9 months later, she gave birth to a boy. She hoped her ex-boyfriend would care for their son, but he showed no interest in either of them. Faced with this situation, Maria had to work hard to support herself and her child, as their financial situation was tight. She wanted to provide her son with a future as good as the one her parents had given her. Fortunately, her parents did not abandon her or the baby. They continued to support them, which helped create a stable environment for the child. During this challenging time, the family offered her the support she needed. Although it was difficult, they all managed to get through it together. This all took place during a time of advanced technology, which allowed Maria to use a computer and access the internet. She didn't want to just wait for things to improve. Instead, she sought an additional source of income by learning how to make handmade soap. After trying her hand at this craft, she discovered she had the potential for even more. This marked the beginning of Maria's journey as a skilled professional with a variety of talents. In addition to selling handmade soap to friends and online, she also learned how to do manicures. She created several groups on social media to showcase her skills, and her client base quickly began to expand. Maria dreamed of building her own website and eventually opening a salon. From the start, her efforts received positive feedback, and her clients were happy with her services. At this point, her main focus was on the well-being of her child and family, and she dedicated her free time to them. Maria longed for love and a family. She dreamed of finding a man to complete her. One day, while she was out in the city gathering materials, she met Esteban Rovira Vargas. He was 16 years older than she was, and despite their age difference, Maria fell deeply in love with him. It's unclear how he left such a strong impression on her, as he was very different from her. Esteban was hot-tempered and aggressive, with a complicated past linked to crime, although he avoided discussing it. Their romance lasted several months before Maria felt ready to introduce him to her family. The meeting was chaotic. Esteban made such a strong impact that her parents were firmly opposed to him. The primary issue with her parents stemmed from Esteban's rudeness, foul language, and blatant disrespect towards others. He came across as cruel and unpredictable. When Maria's parents noticed this, Esteban reacted so violently that Maria had to intervene to prevent a scandal. In the end, Maria's parents insisted that she completely end her relationship, but their efforts were in vain. Maria had strong feelings for Esteban and was determined to stay with him no matter what. Understanding this, her parents reconciled, not wanting to jeopardize their relationship with their daughter or lose the chance to have a future grandchild. A few days later, Maria met Esteban's family, who were just like him, tough and unkind, which made Maria uncomfortable. She confided in her aunt that Esteban was the most reasonable person in his family. Despite his difficult personality, their relationship continued to grow. Esteban appears surprisingly calm around Maria, seemingly relying on her to help curb his temper. On April 6, 2019, they got married. Unfortunately, shortly after the wedding, Esteban revealed that Maria's parents had been right about him. He became increasingly abusive, starting to physically assault her almost immediately. The abuse happened every day, and Maria suffered both physical and emotional torment while trying to keep their new family together. Moreover, she was pregnant with their second child, which made her feel that if she could just hold on, things would improve after the baby was born. Above all, Maria did not want to raise another child without a father. Maria gave birth to her second child in 2020 and became increasingly overwhelmed by the situation. Just before the baby arrived, she moved in with her parents because she could no longer cope and was worried about her health and the baby's safety. After the birth, her husband seemed to have a change of heart. He visited her, sincerely apologized for his past mistakes and the pain he had caused, thanked her for their new son, and promised never to hurt her or argue with her again. Maria believed her plan had worked, but her family, especially her mother and aunt, remained skeptical. They recognized this behavior as typical of manipulators and feared the cycle would repeat. In the following months, Esteban genuinely devoted his free time to Maria and their newborn. He behaved like a caring husband and father, refraining from violence. It appeared that their family life was improving, and they began to share joyful moments together. Esteban also started to spend more time with Maria's older son, who was 7 at the time. However, Maria noticed that he seemed to show more affection for his biological child. Despite this, she felt happy about the positive changes. Esteban even changed jobs, securing a well-paying position as a Spanish teacher in a private school for foreign students, which greatly improved their financial situation. Maria frequently told her friends and family that she was genuinely happy, and even her aunt began to believe it might be true. Maria often kept in touch with her family, sharing that after the birth of their son, Esteban changed drastically. He managed to hide his aggressive and cruel nature, making family life feel like the fairy tale she had always wanted. During this time, they posted many family photos on social media, portraying themselves as happy parents with their children. It appeared to be a happy and healthy family. In this seemingly peaceful environment, more than a year went by. However, Esteban was actually suppressing his anger, which was building up like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap. Eventually, he lost control. He shouted at his wife for no reason and physically harmed her, leaving bruises on her face. Maria, in tears, turned to her relatives to share what had happened. She was reluctant to go to the police, hoping that things would improve and that she could keep the family together for their child's sake. Unfortunately, the situation worsened quickly. After just a few incidents, Esteban began to pressure and torment her even more than he had before the baby was born. Her relatives urged her to end the relationship. Esteban had reverted to the cruel person he had always been, unable to control his inner demons. In December 2021, Maria decided she could no longer endure the abuse. She reported her husband, Esteban. When Maria went to the police station to file her report, she presented fresh bruises on her body. Esteban had struck her so hard that she had visible hematomas on her face. She expressed that this situation could not continue any longer. Maria was frightened for her safety and her children's well-being. During the police investigation, her claims were supported by both her family and several neighbors who had witnessed Esteban's aggressive behavior. Neighbors witnessed that she had faced constant abuse from her husband. He would provoke arguments almost every day, which often escalated into brutal beatings. Maria was so beaten down that she feared talking to Esteban, worried it would lead to another fight. Maria was frequently seen with bruises, and the cause was always the same. Ultimately, she was able to obtain a restraining order, which prohibited Esteban from approaching her or their son without her permission. She moved in with her relatives along with her sons. Maria warned her family that her husband should not be allowed near their home. If he was seen, they should call the police. Even after obtaining a restraining order, Esteban was often spotted near the Quesada family's home. While he appeared to be loitering, it was clear he was looking for a chance to see Maria. Each time he was seen uninvited, he would leave quickly to avoid provoking a police call. But he continued to appear in the area, which was very concerning. Maria and Esteban were going through a divorce, along with custody and property disputes. Unfortunately, the process was progressing too slowly. Maria hoped to prove her husband's cruelty to ensure he would lose the chance to see their son. She feared that if he had contact with the boy, he would suffer the same abuse she had endured. On March 3, 2022, he showed up at Maria's parents' house without her permission. Some of her relatives were there, and they greeted Esteban with displeasure at the door. He requested to speak with Maria to address some issues regarding their divorce, emphasized that the discussion would focus on the division of their shared property. Witnesses present during the meeting observed that, despite his calm demeanor, Esteban was struggling to control his emotions. Maria consented to talk with her husband, particularly since he was not shouting or using foul language as he typically did. However, her family was concerned and advised her not to leave with a man they viewed as dangerous. Esteban insisted that Maria accompany him to retrieve some personal items she had forgotten during their hasty move. He also requested that their conversation remain private. Eventually, he persuaded her to get into the car. Esteban asked Maria to leave their older son with relatives, but he wants her to take the younger son with her. Maria agreed to this arrangement. As soon as they left her parents' house, arguments erupted again, starting the moment they were in the car. Esteban became more aggressive and eventually lost his temper, shouting loudly. They pulled over near the Quesada family home, where a neighbor noticed them arguing inside the car. Upon arriving at the house where they had lived before separating, noise and upheaval could be heard. It seemed that Esteban was breaking things or physically harming his wife again. The child was crying from inside the house. Their 2-year-old son could be heard pleading with his father to stop. Outside, a neighbor heard Maria calling for help. The neighbor rushed to the house but realized he had left his phone behind and couldn't call the police. At that moment, Esteban called his sister, revealing that he had just killed his ex-wife in front of their son, claiming she had attacked him first. His sister was horrified and urged him to take the child and go to the police, but he ignored her. Instead, Esteban left the scene of the crime, still wearing the blood-stained shirt from the incident. He placed the child in the front passenger seat of the car and quickly drove away. Several neighbors called the police, and Esteban's sister also reported the incident. When the police arrived, Esteban had already left the scene. They sealed off the area where Maria was lying, where she was attacked by her husband in the kitchen. The police spoke to the neighbors who were gathered outside Esteban's home. The neighbors confirmed that Esteban had a long history of violent behavior. He was generally disliked in the community due to his rude and aggressive demeanor, often shouting at people for no reason, leading people to keep their distance. Although Maria eventually left him and obtained a restraining order, she made the mistake of getting back into his car. Meanwhile, a white car was driving down the road with Esteban and their 2-year-old son inside. The child was the only witness to the horrific murder, watching as his father stabbed his mother 11 times, mainly in her upper body and head. Maria tried to fight back, but she was powerless. Judging by the position of several wounds, Esteban had likely attacked her from behind. It did not seem as though she had provoked him. Her desperate attempts to fend off his assault were doomed to fail. Realizing that Esteban was trying to escape with their child, a large-scale operation was organized to capture him. The criminal's vehicle was put on alert, and several patrol units were dispatched to intercept him. His condition and intentions were unclear, and the child might be in danger. The police were hesitant to use force to stop the suspect because they feared for the boy's safety. Instead, they decided to follow Esteban. However, catching or even locating him proved to be extremely difficult. Shortly after the search began, officers found Esteban's abandoned car just a few kilometers from the scene of the violent incident, suggesting that Esteban had already switched vehicles. The police had no information about the car Esteban was currently using, and it appeared that he and the child had only one escape route, crossing the border. This raised the risk of losing track of them entirely, as Esteban could take a bus, use another car, or get a ride from someone. The authorities set up checkpoints in hopes of catching Esteban when he tried to cross the border. Fortunately, their strategy paid off. Within a few hours, they tracked him down at a checkpoint while he was attempting to pass through in a stolen vehicle. The border officers had been notified, so when he presented his identification, the chase ended. Esteban was arrested without any resistance. His 2-year-old son had been in the passenger seat the whole time and thankfully had not been harmed. During the search of the vehicle, authorities discovered a firearm and a blood-stained knife, which could have been the murder weapon used against Maria. It was puzzling why the suspect had not disposed of these items earlier. He was promptly sent to the police in his hometown and imprisoned. Esteban now faced serious charges of femicide and was subject to severe penalties typically imposed for such crimes in Latin America. After investigating the knife found in the vehicle, it was confirmed that the blood on it belonged to Maria, and the handle carried Esteban's fingerprints, leaving no doubt about his guilt. The custody of Maria's children was to be transferred to her parents. The older child was quickly placed in the care of Maria's parents. However, there were troubles involving the younger child. Even though Esteban had murdered the child's mother right in front of him and was awaiting trial in prison, Esteban still retained custody rights over the child under Costa Rican law. The boy became embroiled in a custody dispute between the families of his biological parents. The Vargas family aggressively sought custody, employing questionable tactics. They attempted to discredit Maria, suggesting that this could somehow excuse the murder. They claimed that Maria had neglected her sons for a long time and did not care for them properly. Instead, she pressured Esteban, which led him to lash out at her. Ultimately, they suggested that one day, during a heated argument related to their divorce, Maria attacked Esteban, leaving him no choice but to defend himself with a kitchen knife, resulting in wounds inflicted to stop her. They also attempted to portray Maria's parents negatively, arguing that they were unfit guardians. Maria's relatives had long spoken of her suffering from psychological and physical abuse, with accusations of beatings and threats supported by family, friends, and neighbors. Esteban's family depicted him as a victim, which many found hard to believe. Of course, this was a blatant lie. However, statements from Esteban's relatives complicated the prosecution's investigation, forcing them to challenge these claims and gather evidence to support the Quesada family. As a result, a meeting was held to address the situation, which sparked activism from various feminist groups closely following this troubling case of violence. In March 2023, large protests demonstrated strong support for the victim's family. It was evident that the misleading narrative from Esteban and his relatives did not convince anyone, except perhaps the defense. The public wanted to ensure that the murderer faced severe punishment. Women across the country asserted that a lack of accountability only led to more violent crimes, and the statistics clearly supported their claims. The trial of Esteban Rivera Vargas, who abused his family, resumed in Santa Cruz on March 9, 2023. The prosecution argued that he deliberately killed his wife. In contrast, the defense, supported by Esteban and his family, claimed that he was actually the victim. However, their claims were quickly proven false, as the prosecution presented multiple witnesses, including neighbors, who testified to Esteban's violent behavior. Sadly, Maria's youth and innocence led her to make poor decisions, while the Vargas family's lies were exposed through forensic analysis, which conclusively resolved the case. The nature of Maria's injuries ruled out the possibility that she had attacked Esteban. 2 strikes to her back clearly indicated a planned assault. Esteban had intended to harm her from the outset. Maria's younger son could not serve as a witness due to his age. However, recordings of conversations with their 2-year-old child were presented in court. These recordings revealed that Esteban repeatedly acted aggressively and often assaulted Maria. The older son also testified, corroborating his brother's claims about the violence inflicted by Esteban. Both children were afraid of him, especially the older son, who was not Esteban's biological child and held a strong bias against him. As a result of their traumatic experiences and the loss of their mother, both sons were sent for psychological treatment. The prosecution sought a 37-year prison sentence for the defendant, while the defense maintained his innocence throughout the trial, attempting to reduce his sentence and even aiming for an acquittal. Fortunately, these efforts were unsuccessful. In May 2023, the court ruled in favor of Maria. The defendant, Esteban Rivera Vargas, was sentenced to 35 years and 8 months in prison, and he is currently serving his sentence in a maximum security facility. Additionally, Esteban was ordered to pay 75 million Costa Rican colones in compensation to Maria's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Luisa Cedeno. On July 18, 2020, Maria Luisa Cedeno arrived at the Lamb Mission Inn Hotel in Manuel Antonio, in the Costa Rican province of Puntarenas. She was traveling with her little dog named Mafalda, it she treated like a daughter. The first day passed without incident. Maria Luisa went to the beach, had lunch at a restaurant, and drank some alcohol, activities common for tourists. However, the following day, everything changed. At 4:30 p.m. sharp, Maria requested that a bottle of wine, mineral water, and 2 glasses be brought to her room. It's worth noting that she didn't mention being with anyone, and everyone around her was convinced that she wanted to rest alone. Throughout the entire afternoon and night, no movement was recorded in her room. On July 20th, the hotel staff tried to contact her, but they received no response. A staff member had previously spoken with Maria, who mentioned that she lived alone because she had recently separated from her boyfriend, was not feeling well, and was only traveling with her small dog, Mafalda. Since several months had passed since the official start of the pandemic, Maria said that this had also affected her mental health, which was deteriorating. Considering everything she had been through, she said she needed a vacation. Therefore, the hotel staff decided to enter the room to check regularly in case of any unforeseen circumstances. The front door was locked from the inside, so they looked for another way in and checked the door leading to the patio. This room had an emergency exit for guests with pets. They had previously opened the patio door so the dog could go outside. When the staff approached this exit, they found the door half open. Upon entering, they were hit by a terrible odor and saw blood stains throughout the room. The dog was alive, trembling in a corner and avoiding the staff, likely due to trauma or fear. The lifeless body of Maria was found lying motionless on the bed, wrapped in a sheet. Maria Luisa Cedeno was a highly respected anesthesiologist. At 43, She led the Department of Anesthesiology and Rehabilitation at Sima Hospital in Esquezu. Her colleagues admired her greatly, and during the early pandemic, she was notably committed to helping patients in need. As a medical professional, she provided significant support to her loved ones, arranging health insurance, assisting with medical appointments. Maria's parents lived in San Carlos, which made it difficult for her to be with her family all the time. Friends described her as a strong, intelligent, and likable woman who loved traveling both within Costa Rica and internationally. Her reputation was impeccable. The news of Maria's death was a tremendous shock to her family and Costa Rica. People were left asking, who would want to harm someone like Maria? From the moment the hotel staff discovered the lifeless Maria body, the mysteries of this case began. The crime scene is confusing, not only because of the brutality Maria endured, but also because of the mysteries that arise as soon as they enter the hotel room she rented. Like most hotels worldwide, this hotel keeps a record of the magnetic keys used for the rooms. This means that each time a room is accessed, the card used is recorded, and the key's code is identified. This system allows they to determine whether the person accessing the room was a guest or a hotel employee. In Maria's murder, there was no record of any other keys being used other than hers. Maria had entered her room alone the previous night, with no one else entering through the main door. However, the room had a sliding glass door at the back that could be used as an alternative entry point. Since this door could only be locked from the inside, it is possible that Maria left the door unlocked, either intentionally letting someone in or accidentally leaving the door open. This allowed someone to enter and commit the murder. As the door didn't have an electronic lock system, there was no record of anyone entering or exiting through it. This was considered the most logical explanation at the time. After discovering Maria's body, hotel staff immediately contacted the police. Upon examining the scene, it was clear that she had been brutally murdered. Her body showed severe damage, indicating that she had been tortured by someone who was extremely enraged. Forensic experts collected evidence and analyzed every detail to determine the cause of death and identify the perpetrator. The authorities recommended a closed casket at the funeral due to the extreme level of brutality inflicted upon Maria. An autopsy was later performed, which showed that the body had multiple bite marks and 2 broken fingernails, indicating that Maria attempted to defend herself. The autopsy also revealed that the killer cleaned the she-body after the murder. According to the investigator, Maria was killed in the bedroom, as evidenced by the large amount of blood found on the bed. The killer then moved the body to the bathroom, washed and dried it, wrapped it in a sheet, and placed it back on the bed. Although the killer attempted to wash the Maria body to eliminate evidence, this proved nearly impossible due to the extensive presence of blood throughout the room. Bloodstains were found on the floor, walls, curtains, and bed, indicating the brutality of the attack. The forensic experts took photographs and collected as much physical evidence as possible from the scene. The body was then sent for an autopsy, and the police started interviewing the hotel staff and guests who may have witnessed or heard something. Given the state of the crime scene, it is likely that Maria screamed violently and her dog barked loudly during the attack. However, no one reported hearing any screams throughout the night. The hotel was relatively empty, but there were still a few people working at the hotel, and the hotel owner, Harry Bowden, who lived there with his husband Dano, were also present there. Additionally, Harry had allowed some acquaintances to stay at the hotel due to their financial difficulties. A bottle of wine and 2 glasses were found in Maria's hotel room. The wine had been ordered from room service. Later, investigators examined Maria's cell phone and found that she had sent a photo of the 2 glasses to a friend. However, the message did not indicate that she was with someone or she was waiting for someone to come to her room. She also sent an audio message to the same friend describing the hotel's all-inclusive package and its benefits. Maria seemed pleased with the service, mentioning that staff would bring her drinks, fruit, and other treats. She also mentioned interacting with hotel staff, including the bartender and hotelier's assistant, and noted that the owner was Dutch. Although she acknowledged the hotel is a bit worn out and understaffed, she expressed her overall satisfaction with her stay. The room cost 155,000 colons per night. Authorities investigating Maria's murder spoke with her friends and relatives to identify suspect. They discovered that she often ordered 2 glasses, even when alone, to have one for alcohol and one for water. This suggested she wasn't waiting for anyone at the time of the attack. The investigation revisited the initial theory: the attacker must have been someone who saw Maria in the hotel, noticed the back door was open and attacked her. However, the extreme brutality of the crime suggests that the killer had deep hatred and anger towards the victim, and often the killer knew the victim. Even so, there is no evidence that Maria was with anyone or had enemies at the time of her death. The autopsy revealed additional details about Maria's death, including signs of strangulation, blows to her face, arms, and chest, and evidence of abuse. After analyzing the autopsy results, conducting interviews with family, friends, and hotel staff, authorities concluded that the attack was likely carried out by multiple individuals. This theory was based on the fact that there were no reports of Maria screaming during the attack. Authorities believed that at least 2 attackers were involved, and they took complete control of Maria. Some investigators even suggested that a third person may have been involved, as the victim showed signs of abuse. According to this theory, 2 assailants held Maria Luisa down and a third raped her. All of this is evidenced by the fact that when her body was analyzed, there was no sign of rope or anything to indicate that she was tied up. Police speculated that the men may have stuffed something into Maria's mouth to stop her from screaming or to prevent her screams from being heard, in order to carry out the attack undetected. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury, which could have occurred in several ways. It might have been caused by a violent blow to the head, by being undressed, as there was evidence of fractured vertebrae, or by being hit with an object or falling heavily to the floor. Overall, what the assailants did to Maria was an atrocity, and without clear motivation. The first suspect was quickly identified because this man, who was staying at the hotel, had numerous fresh wounds resembling scratches and blows, suggesting he had been defending himself. Upon investigation, it was revealed to be Teodoro Herrera Martinez, an exotic dancer working in the city's nightclubs and staying at the hotel at the time of the murder. Teodoro was arrested when authorities were looking for evidence that he was involved in the murder. The man's footprints were compared to those at the crime scene. 2 matching prints were found on the black ceramic tile floor in front of the bed in the bedroom. A short time later, a second suspect named Luis Carlos Miranda was arrested. A hotel security guard had seen him walking in the hallways at night with Teodoro. Because Torreira was already in custody, Luis needed to be questioned to check for any links to the case. Additionally, tests revealed that his dental records matched the bite marks on Maria's body. Hotel employees testified that they saw Maria talking to Luis and, on one occasion, to Teodoro. However, their interactions were casual, like simple greetings, rather than those of acquaintances or friends. This might be because there were very few guests at the hotel, so they may have passed each other many times. Earlier, the hotel owner allowed 2 friends, Luis and Teodoro, to stay on the property due to financial difficulties. The police decided to question the owner of the hotel, Harry Bowden, after finding matching footprints and bite marks from the 2 suspects, Luis and Teodoro. During questioning, Harry revealed that on the night of the murder, July 19, 2020, he and husband were having dinner in their apartment within the hotel with Luis and Teodoro. After dinner, the 4 men went to a private pool. Harry also disclosed that Luis and Teodoro worked for him in exchange for accommodation. Luis managed the website and marketing, while Teodoro worked as a cook and bartender. The hotel owners and Luis and Teodoro were not close friends initially, but after moving into the hotel a year before the murder, they started spending more time together, going out for meals and socializing. And thus, the four men became friends. Although Harry cooperated by giving an interview in August 2020, but he was arrested because bite marks found on Maria's body matched his dental records, which began to reveal the truth. The police confiscated the phones of all the detainees and found text messages between Luis and Harry that turned out to be very compromising. In these messages, Luis invited Harry to have an intimate relationship with a woman he had been following. This exchange happened several days before the incident. However, Luis and Harry claimed that the messages didn't mean anything and that they were just joking, but that, along with the physical evidence, was enough for the authorities to keep them in jail while the case was being put together. The only person not arrested was Harry's husband. Because there was no evidence against him, no text messages, no fingerprints, and the bite marks didn't match those on Maria's body. Luis, Harry, and Teodoro's defense argued that the bite mark evidence was inconclusive and that none of them were involved in the murder. Despite this, the three men were charged with the murder of Maria. Before the trial, Harry's lawyer requested that he be released and placed under house arrest for two reasons. First, due to Harry being 69 years old, staying in jail was risky. Second, he had difficulty walking due to recent knee surgery. The defense claimed he had been using a cane for a long time, and at the trial's start, he appeared in a wheelchair. Because of this request, he was placed under house arrest and returned to the hotel where he was staying, and he couldn't leave the hotel. On September 13, 2022, the trial of Luis, Harry, and Teodoro began, where evidence against them was presented. The prosecution struggled to prove the involvement of Harry and Luis. They had text messages and bite marks on Maria's body as evidence. However, the bite marks couldn't definitively identify the murderer, they could only exclude suspects. All hotel employees were ruled out as suspects, but not these two, Harry and Luis. In contrast, Teodoro had the most evidence against him. There was a blood trail, and he had wounds inflicted by Maria during her self-defense, as his blood was found under her fingernails. Blood was also found on his shoes, watch, and cell phone, located in his room during the search. Given this evidence, only Teodoro Herrera Martinez was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison, while Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda were acquitted due to a lack of physical evidence. Many people believe that Luis and Harry were involved in the murder because the hotel security cameras mysteriously stopped working on the day it happened. This suggests that someone might have planned it. A hotel security guard was also suspected, but he and the other two individuals could not be arrested due to a lack of evidence. Strangely, the guard left for another country after the murder, even though the police asked him to attend the trial as a witness. There are several aspects of this case that suggest more people might be involved. For example, two guests told the police that the hotel experienced a power outage for many hours on the night of the murder, which may have been intentional. This could have been done to disable the security cameras and the magnetic keys. A peculiar detail is that 9 days after the murder, investigators searched Harry's private office, which may have given him enough time to destroy any evidence. They not only analyzed text messages but also looked at Luis and Harry's social media accounts, where they discovered discussions about an idea directly related to how to find Maria's body. Legally, Harry and Luis are presumed innocent. The only person in prison for this murder is Teodoro Herrera Martinez, who is awaiting a new trial to see if his sentence can be reduced. Although the case is solved, but the Maria family suspects something is being hidden. They suspect a defense or cover-up. The family reported that the authorities returned Maria's belongings soaked in blood, which they find puzzling because they wanted to preserve the evidence in case new information emerged. They are satisfied with Teodoro's conviction, but not with the acquittal of Harry and Louis. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Diogo Goncalves. Albufeira, a beautiful resort town, is one of the most visited places in the Algarve region of southern Portugal. It was there, in 1999, that Diogo was born. He is the only child of a poor but hard-working family whose income mainly depended on the of tourism. Diogo's parents saw him as a good son, and those who knew him described him as decent, responsible, hard-working, and reliable. He was also a very outgoing young man who loved being surrounded by friends and family. Diogo went to high school in his hometown. After graduating, he started studying computer science. To fund his education and support his family, he got a job at McDonald's in 2015 when he was just 16. At 17, while still working there, his life became miserable when his father suffered a stroke and fell into a vegetative state, as reported by the media. That same year, while Diogo and his mother were dealing with his father's health crisis, another tragedy struck. His mother, who had always supported his learning and growth, was hit by a car on her way to work at the mall, where she cleaned. The car dragged her several meters, leading to her falling into a ditch where she died from her injuries. Although the driver fled, but the police identified him and he faced trial. While he was waiting for the conviction of the person responsible for his parents' suffering, Diogo needed to be transferred to a medical unit where he received the necessary care. His maternal aunt, worried about his situation, had suggested that he move in with her. However, they had a serious disagreement, and after a few weeks, it became impossible for them to continue living together. Diogo explained what was happening to his friend, who offered him a room in his house in the Aldea neighborhood, also in Albufeira. At the time, the closeness to the friend's relatives helped Diogo feel at home. Despite his young age, Diogo demonstrated great ability to handle and overcome difficult situations with patience and optimism. In 2017, at just 18 years old, Diogo graduated with a degree in computer technology and completed a 6-month internship at Vila Vida Park, a leading 5-star hotel. His impressive work led the executives to offer him a position as a technician. In 2018, Diogo accepted the offer and left his job at a fast food restaurant chain, where he had worked for nearly a year and had become a duty manager. This thing a new chapter in his life, filled with opportunities to advance after overcoming difficult times. After working at the company for some time and anticipating better days ahead, he decided to buy a car. Diogo got along well with his co-workers, especially Maria Malvero, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel. Maria, like Diogo, comes from a family with difficult circumstances and faces her own challenges. Her mother had mental health issues, and her father left when she was very young. She never spoke to him again. Maria, interested in martial arts, practiced karate and aspired to be a police officer. However, her application to the police academy was rejected due to her tattoo. Disappointed, she decided to study at Securinfo, a company that trains security guards in various private security fields. Diogo was interested in Maria and made his feelings known from the start, but she did not feel the same way and treated him coldly. Fabio Acosta, a close friend of Diogo, said that Diogo was deeply in love with Maria. He was so infatuated that he declined a well-paying job offer from the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon because he didn't want to be away from her. Additionally, he would bring her meals when she was working. Over time, they became very close, and people around them assumed they were a couple. However, there was no romantic relationship between them. Maria told Diogo she didn't want anything to do with him because she had just ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer, yet she was still giving him false hopes. Diogo never gave up hope for a future with Maria and sought opportunities to be near her and make her happy in various ways. One day, he was deeply disappointed when he saw a video on social media of Maria kissing another girl. Diogo was upset because he believed she should have told him that she wasn't interested in men and that this was why they could never be together. Fabio, Diogo's best friend, tried to reassure him by saying that girls often do this, but Diogo was not convinced. He insisted that she had lied to him and that was why she had rejected him. Despite the disappointment, Diogo and Maria stayed friends, and she continued to accept his gifts and invitations for dates. Several times, Diogo offered to walk her home, but she always said her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and she didn't want to bring another man into the apartment. As time went on, in December 2019, Diogo learned that he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which had occurred 3 years earlier. After receiving the payment amount of up to €70,000, Diogo decided it was time to buy a house to avoid continuing to pay rent. He shared the good news with his friend Maria, who left her job at the hotel a few weeks later. Maria stated that she could no longer stand the colleagues' comments about the relationship between her and Diogo. She also explained that she wanted to spend more time with her mother, who needed a lot of attention due to a mental illness. At that moment, there was no reason to doubt her words. However, subsequent incidents suggest that her decision to leave the hotel was motivated by dark reasons, and this is where the third character in the story, Mariana Fonseca, 20 years old, comes in. Mariana worked as a nurse at the hospital and had a dear relationship with Maria. They both lived together in Mariana's parents' house, because they still do not have enough money to have their own home where they could enjoy their relationship. When Maria discovered the substantial amount of money Diogo, she started getting closer to he. It seems Maria shared this information with Mariana, and they decide to trick Diogo in order to gain access to his bank account and steal the compensation money. After Maria repeatedly refused to date Diogo, one day, she told him she wanted to spend a romantic evening with him. This was a significant surprise for Diogo, who was overjoyed and couldn't believe his luck. After waiting for so long, he was ecstatic about finally being with the girl he loved. They planned the meeting for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was thrilled and didn't question why Maria had suddenly changed her mind. Maria and Mariana had different accounts of the incident that day, but here are the facts according to media reports based on official information. When Diogo entered, Maria offered him some orange juice she had brought. However, the drink contained an unexpected ingredient, diindawomethane, DIM, a drug affecting the central nervous system, with analgesic and sedative properties. Maria using the drug, which she had stolen from the hospital. Her plan was to sedate Diogo, access his banking information, and manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone. Mariana waited in a car outside while Maria executed the plan. Mariana even texted she several times to check if the drug had taken effect, as it was taking longer than expected. The situation inside the house became increasingly more tense. Diogo didn't understand what was happening and started to feel anxious. Maria then tries to calm him down by promising to show him an erotic dance, but first she has to tie him to a table. After being restrained for a few minutes, Diogo panicked and asked Maria to release him, but she became aggressive, leading to a struggle. Using her martial arts skills, she subdued Diogo by knocking him to the floor and choking him, prevent him from breathing. According to Mariana's testimony, Maria later instructed her to enter the apartment. Upon entering, Mariana found Diogo on the floor. She questioned Maria about the incident and criticized her for going beyond their plans, which was to steal his keys and take his money. Seeing Diogo unresponsive, Mariana began resuscitation efforts. When he woke up, he was extremely agitated and attempted to attack she. It seems he realized that Mariana was plotting against him, led him to try to defend himself. In response to Diogo's aggression towards Mariana, Maria intervened by grabbing him from behind, bringing him to the ground, and restraining him by squeezing his neck again. Diogo's life ended tragically at the hands of the girl he loved, Maria. His body was found in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house, where they continued with their planned robbery. They first severed his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, access a mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process took several days because there was a limit on the amount that could be transferred each day. When he learned that Diogo had work scheduled the next day, Mariana and Maria tried to prevent his colleagues from noticing his absence, searching for him, and reporting him missing. One of Diogo's colleagues received a text from his number stating that he couldn't make it to work that day and needed someone to cover for him. Diogo's colleague, who disliked last-minute shift changes, found the request odd. Diogo asked if everything was okay and received a simple yes in response. The conversation among Diogo's co-worker and others continued throughout Friday and part of Saturday, but the unusual messages increasingly seemed uncharacteristic of him. One person receiving these messages was Diogo's supervisor. One message said that Diogo wouldn't be returning to work because he had met a woman in France and planned to move in with her. This explanation seemed odd to the supervisor because Diogo was a responsible employee and wouldn't leave his job so abruptly. To find the answer, the supervisor attempted to call Diogo but received no answer. Later, he got a message stating that Diogo was not in to talk on the phone. The supervisor responded, saying he could only feel reassured if they spoke. He wanted to hear Diogo's voice and wanted to know what was happening. Diogo's loved ones reacted to messages sent by Maria and Mariana, in which they pretended to be Diogo. This prompted them to alter their plan for explaining Diogo's sudden disappearance. They decided to make it appear as if Diogo had ended his life and planned to dismember his body to get rid of the evidence. Maria later mentioned that their actions were inspired by the TV show Dexter, featuring a forensic scientist who killed criminals and disguised his crimes by dismembering their bodies. After executing their horrific plan, Mariana and Maria placed Diogo's body in trash bags in the trunk of their car. They then went to an ATM and shopped at a mall, where they were seen hugging and laughing on security cameras. Following this, they returned to Mariana's home to begin dismembering Diogo's body. Ultimately, they put Diogo's torso in a black bag and discarded the other parts in a container. Meanwhile, Diogo's friends launched a campaign to report him as missing and reached out to the authorities. The authorities then waited the required 48 hours before officially declaring him missing. Mariana and Maria left the house, with Maria getting into Diogo's car to drive to a cliff near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. Mariana followed behind in her own car. Around 2 p.m. that day, Mariana threw Diogo's torso off the cliff and abandoned his car nearby. They planned to make it seem like he had jumped voluntarily. However, instead of falling into the sea, the remains got stuck on a rock. Finally, Mariana and Maria drove together in Mariana's car for about 12 minutes, covering 7 kilometers, to the Inferno Dago waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of the rest of Diogo's body in the water. Shortly after, Diogo's car was discovered in a parking lot near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. A newspaper report stated that 2 laptops were found inside the car, led forensic police to investigate. A land and sea search was launched, leading to the discovery of a young man's torso partially covered by a black garbage bag. Meanwhile, at another location along the coast, a French couple found the young man's head at Inferno Toigo. Diogo's hands and feet were later recovered during an intensive police search. The investigators assigned to the case found the details surrounding Diogo's death unusual. They noted that he was a quiet man who don't hang out with bad people. As the police continued their investigation, they discovered that Diogo had received a significant payout following his mother's death. While examining money orders, they found that a large sum had been transferred from Diogo's account to someone named Maria. Naturally, the detectives' next move was to locate Maria to understand why she had received money from Diogo. Maria attempted to persuade the police that she killed Diogo in self-defense, claiming he was trying to abuse her. She stated that this was why she had left the hotel prior to the incident. However, a review of the text messages between Diogo and Maria, they showed that her claims were false. After Maria stopped working, she and Diogo grew close. During her initial meeting with the police, Maria insisted that she was entirely responsible for planning and carrying out the incident that led to the shooting. Maria clarified that Mariana was not involved in the crime at all. However, Mariana's account of the incident contradicted what Maria's claimed. Mariana reported that Maria to wanting to steal Diogo's money and intended to kill him. She stated that Maria's plan was to make him suffer in order to extract his bank account password. Investigators gathered enough evidence to convict both girls, Mariana and Maria, including phone records, the Diogo's cell phone, and ATM surveillance footage. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and faced court in June of that year. The judge carefully reviewed the incidents that Maria described. Maria remained steadfast in her confession and denied any involvement Mariana's. She stated that Diogo's body was in a suitcase in a car parked in the garage for 2 days, and it was there that the dismemberment took place, while Mariana's family was sleeping. After hearing Maria's detailed testimony about the incidents, the judge repeatedly asked her Mariana was during the dismemberment, as which had been done with surgical precision at the joints. All attention in the courtroom turned to the nurse, Mariana. She anticipated the questions and clarified that, since everyone was aware of her employment at the hospital, they mistakenly thought she was responsible for dismembering the corpse. She said that dismemberment could easily be done by using information on the internet. The judge imposed a detention order on both Mariana and Maria, citing that they had committed a serious crime in a creepy, calculated, reckless, and extremely brutal manner. A few months later, on February 24, 2021, the trial began. During her testimony on February 26, 2021, Maria claimed that she initially wanted revenge on Diogo because he had abused her, but did not intend to kill him. She admitted that her goal was to humiliate him and clarified that Mariana had no relationship with Diogo. Mariana and Maria attended court together but did not make eye contact during the trial. It is rumored that after the arrest and subsequent jail time, they decided to end their friendship. The trial included testimonies from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. She explained that the level of diphenhydramine found in Diogo's blood was much lower than expected from the 3 ampoules, suggesting that he either did not take the prescribed dose or had taken it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Maria Malvero was convicted of several serious crimes, including aggravated murder, destroy the body, robbery, unauthorized access, fraud, carjacking, and possession of an illegal weapon. As a result, she received a 25-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €265,000 in compensation to Diogo's father. Mariana Fonseca, on the other hand, was acquitted of murder but found guilty of destroy the body, complicity, and fraud. She received a 4-year prison sentence but was released because none of her convictions required pre-trial detention, at least until the final sentencing. The court determined that Mariana's effort to save life Diogo indicated that she did not intend to kill him. The judge based his decision on a confession from she, in which she accepted full responsibility for her actions. However, this verdict was not accepted by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally guilty of the serious crime against Diogo alongside Maria. After the verdict, Mariana exited the courtroom through a separate exit where her father, who had attended all the hearings, was waiting. Neither of them spoke to the media. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Polly Klaas. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California, USA. Her family included her father Mark, mother Eva, and younger sister Annie. After her parents' divorce when she was very young, Polly and Annie lived with their mother in Petaluma, California. As for Mark, he had a new relationship after the divorce, and Polly got along very well with this woman. Overall, their family was very harmonious, and she spent time with both her mother and father, with no problems between them. Polly was a quiet and innocent child who had a few close friends but was generally very shy. However, she found confidence and joy in theater, participating in various school plays and community musicals where she often took the lead role. Her main aspiration is to become a talented musical theater actress. Aside from theater, Polly loves hosting and attending sleepovers with her friends, a regular activity shared among her close-knit group. On October 1, 1993, Polly asked her mother if she could have two friends, Jillian and Kate, over for a sleepover. Her mother agreed, and the two friends arrived at Polly's house in the afternoon. They had dinner together, and the evening went smoothly until Polly's mother went to bed around 9:45 p.m. due to a bad headache. She told the girls that she was going to sleep and asked them to wake her up if they needed any help at any time. After taking 2 sleeping pills, she fell into a deep sleep. The calm night was disrupted after 11 p.m. when Eva, Polly's mother, was jolted awake by the screams of Jillian and Kate. The two girls frantically told her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly away. Eva made an emergency call to the police and then went to check on her other daughter, Annie, who was in her room, seemingly unaware of the incident. When the police arrived, they started questioning Polly's two friends, Jillian and Kate. The girls explained they were in a room, select on a Halloween costume and just having fun. As the night wore on, around 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was time to go to bed, and her friends agreed. She offered to get the inflatable bed she and her mom had set up earlier so the three could sleep together. However, when Polly opened the door to her room, a man was standing in front of them, holding a knife and not wearing a mask. Since Halloween approached, 3 girls initially thought man's threatening claims were a prank and burst into laughter. However, the man's facial expression quickly turned to anger, causing them to realize the situation was more serious. He swiftly forcing the girls into a room, where he bound their hands and feet with rope. When questioned about who lived in the house, all 3 girls, including Jillian and Kate, provided the same answer: Polly. Next, the man removed the pillowcases from the pillows and placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, preventing them from seeing. He instructed the girls to count up to 1,000, assuring them that he would temporarily take Polly away but return her shortly. Unbeknownst to the man, the girls peered through gaps in the pillowcases and noticed his swift departure. Then, they attempted to release themselves from the restraints. After about 30 minutes of struggle, they managed to break free. Upon escaping the room, they immediately sought out Eva to inform her that her daughter Polly had been taken by the man. Jillian and Kate provided the police with a detailed account of the events. They also gave a brief description of the man, who had not worn a mask and no covered his face, allowing the girls to get a clear look at him. As a result, the police were able to create a sketch of the suspect to aid in the search. The investigation at Polly's house did not yield much evidence. Several footprints were found, but they all belonged to Polly, her family members, or friends who had visited the house recently. However, some unusual fibers were discovered on the carpet, which did not match the carpet in Polly's house. Further analysis revealed that these fibers likely came from the carpet of a vehicle. The police then analyzed the cars of individuals who were known to the family and had visited the house, but none of them matched the fibers. This led to the assumption that the fibers were from the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was discovered at the scene. At that time, fingerprinting and DNA technology had not yet advanced to the point where it could be compared to a database. However, the print was preserved for potential future use if a suspect was later identified. In Polly's room, a piece of fabric resembling silk was also found. The fabric had a distinctive pattern and appeared to have been cut from a garment with scissors. The police believed this fabric could serve as a valuable clue in the future. A hair was discovered, but its origin remained unknown since DNA analysis was not advanced enough to thoroughly examine it at the time. Polly's case generated one of the largest searches in the United States at that time. Thousands of volunteers joined the search, with 4,000 people combing neighborhoods, vacant lots, and large estates near her home. The police also attempted to locate drivers matching the suspect's description, but all did not bring any results. The police had a narrow 24-hour window to locate Polly after her disappearance, as chances of finding her alive would significantly decrease beyond that time frame. To expedite the investigation, they handed the case over to the FBI and launched an urgent search. However, as the days went by, hopes of a safe recovery Polly began to dwindle. During the investigation, police inquired about witnesses in the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual on the night of the abduction. Several neighbors reported seeing a suspicious individual lurking around the area, describing him as peculiar-looking. They didn't think much of it at the time because they had no reason to believe the man was capable of committing a serious crime like kidnapping. As a result, they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The police shared a sketch of the suspect with the neighbors, based on a description provided by Polly's friends. The neighbors all recognized the man in the sketch. In a separate investigation, the police also questioned the teachers and staff at Polly's school to see if anyone knew the man or had any information about Polly's disappearance. Unfortunately, no one at the school had any knowledge about the man or the incident surrounding Polly's disappearance. The staff members all had alibis for the time in question and none of them matched the description or resembled the sketch of suspects. The police have conducted a thorough and comprehensive investigation of the case, they comparing a fiber found in Polly's house to the car mats of teachers and school staff vehicles, but unfortunately, no matches were found. Over time, feelings of hopelessness and fear grew, not only for Polly's family but also for the authorities and the general public. Everyone is concerned about the threat this criminal may pose to society, so they demand that the police quickly solve the case. To gather more information, a $200,000 reward was offered to anyone providing information that could aid in locating Polly. This reward was funded by actress Winona Ryder, who also held a press conference to publicly appeal kidnapper for Polly's safe return. At the time, the internet was still in its early stages, and law enforcement agencies, including the police and the FBI, were unfamiliar with using the internet to locate missing persons. To assist in the investigation, 3 individuals from California took matters into their own hands. They created and posted a picture of Polly, a sketch of her suspected kidnapper, and an advertisement for a reward for any information that could lead to her safe return. Although social media platforms did not exist at the time, other online communication tools were available. As a result, approximately 25 million people in the United States viewed Polly's picture online. Initially, FBI investigators believed that the internet could play a crucial role in the investigation. Although the disappearance became increasingly well known, but internet users do not bring any valuable information. However, this has attracted many volunteers to help, and telephone switchboards were established with hundreds of information every day. This thing also brings hope in the families of other missing children, who reached out to Polly's family to support and assistance, hoping that by working together, they might be able to find their own missing children. The investigators were growing increasingly frustrated. It has been many weeks since Polly was kidnapped, and they had yet to uncover any leads. The identity of the kidnapper remained a mystery, and without any DNA evidence, they were unable to make a match. Not even a hair or palm print had been left found, leaving them feeling helpless. Finally, a new breakthrough in the case has come. A phone call was called to Polly's father, Mark. On the other end of the line, he heard a girl's voice that sounded uncannily like his daughter's. She claimed to be Polly and told Mark that she was being held at a hotel. The kidnapper had momentarily left her alone, and that's why she was able to contact he. However, before Mark could glean any more information, the girl hung up. Mark immediately rushed to the police station to tell the news. Unfortunately, the FBI at the time lacked the advanced technology to track a call that had already been disconnected. All they could do was wait anxiously for the kidnapper to make another move, so they can only sit and wait for a new call, hoping to trace it. A few hours after the first call, the same girl who had spoken to Mark called again. The police managed to trace the call, but found it odd that the location was not a hotel, as the girl claimed, but a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived and knocked on the door of the house where the call originated, they discovered it was a prank. It turned out a teenage girl, close to Polly's age, lived there, so their voices were similar. She explained that her friends had dared her to do it. The girl was not arrested or taken to the police station. Instead, her parents were advised to monitor her behavior and remind her not to joke about such serious issues. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly disappeared, police received a call from a woman. She reported that she found 3 suspicious items on a several-acre plot of land she owned. The police, along with the FBI, went to the location and found 3 critical pieces of evidence: a piece of silk identical to one in Polly's room, a pair of ballet shoes that Eva claimed were missing from the house the night Polly vanished, and some duct tape. These evidence led the police to suspect that Polly might have been in the area. Before all this evidence was discovered, on the day Polly disappeared, the same woman went to the police to report a problem. Strangers had been wandering onto her plot of land. She owned a lot of land, which was mostly forest, and had only one small house inside. Although there were signs indicating it was private property, there was no fence to keep people out, so many unknowingly crossed onto her land. Although her land had many intruders, but one particular out in her memory. On the night Polly was abducted, a man drove up to her house in his car, which got stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, was the first to notice the man but didn't approach him because she was too scared. The homeowner also didn't approach him, as she thought he looked angry. They decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they interrogated the man about why he was there. He explained that he hadn't realized it was private property and promised to leave quickly. However, he requested their assistance in getting his car out of the mud. The officers noticed that the man seemed very nervous, scared, and sweaty, and he also appeared to be under the influence of drugs. Since they were unable to conduct a drug test at the time and the man was not acting aggressively, they were unable to arrest him. The officers helped him out of the mud, and he eventually drove away. This man was Richard Allen Davis, born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was troubled due to the violence inflicted by his parents. When he was 12, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him, saying she wanted nothing to do with him, and left him with his father. Richard's father was very irresponsible, often leaving the house for hours or even days. Richard was frequently left alone, sometimes staying with neighbors and sometimes staying with some of his relatives. During his teenage years, Richard began engaging in criminal activities such as stealing and fighting, which led to several months in reform school. At 17, Richard committed a violent robbery that almost resulted in the victim's death. The judge offered him a choice: go to reform school or join the U.S. Army. Richard chose the Army but was dishonorably discharged in less than 2 years. As he grew older, his criminal record grew longer. Around the age of 20, he was sentenced to 15 years for robbery and kidnapping, but was released after 1 year on parole for good behavior. During that period, Richard was troubled by another accusation. Many of his friends suspected him of killing a 19-year-old girl named Marlene, even though the police acknowledged that she had left voluntarily. However, those close to Marlene believed Richard was responsible for her death, occurring the night they attended a party together. These were merely rumors, with no evidence to support them. When Polly went missing, Richard was having a difficult time, and he had no fixed address, so his whereabouts were unclear. The police distributed a special leaflet exclusively to officers, urging them to be extremely cautious. They withheld information from the media due to concerns that Richard might flee California or even the United States. On November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol. A police officer stopped him, and he failed a breathalyzer test. Upon checking Richard's name and picture, the officer recognized him as the suspect wanted in the Polly kidnapping case. The officer carefully informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating probation due to drunk driving. Richard complied and was taken to the police station. There, officers read him his rights and revealed that he was actually being held for the kidnapping of Polly. Richard was taken in for questioning. The investigation was careful and he eventually admitted to kidnapping Polly. His palm print matched exactly with the one found at Polly's house, and carpet fibers from his car matched those found in the house. Polly's friends were brought to the police station for questioning and immediately identified Richard as the kidnapper. Additionally, a piece of silk identical to one found in Polly's room was discovered in his car and on the piece of land of the woman who reported the incident to the police. All evidence pointed to Richard, leading he to finally confess. He explained that he had been using substances with friends that day and felt unwell. He decided to break into a house in a neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around until he reached Polly's neighborhood. Seeing an open window, he entered the house. He stated that he hadn't planned the incident, didn't know Polly or her family, and hadn't been following them. He was searching for valuables but didn't find much. As he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard noted that she was very frightened and, in his panic, decided to take her. He stated that he put Polly in his car and started driving, eventually stopping in a vacant lot where he assaulted her. Afterwards, he got back into the driver's seat. When the woman and the babysitter spotted Richard on private piece of land, Polly was in the back seat. Police officers helped him retrieve his car from the mud, and at that point, Polly was still alive, which deeply frustrated officers as they believed her life could have been saved. After the car was pushed out of the mud, Richard drove down the highway, strangled Polly to death, and left her body there. Richard reported the exact location of the grave to the police, leading to a search that took place on December 4, 1993, 2 months 3 days after the girl was abducted. Polly's body was found in a grave beside the highway, dug by Richard himself. The forensic examination mainly confirmed the cause of death as strangulation, consistent with Richard's account. The date of her death was approximately the same day she disappeared. With all the evidence, Richard Allen Davis was put on trial for kidnapping, murdering, and raping Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. Besides apologizing to the family, he accused Polly's father of sexually abusing her. Richard claimed that Polly had told him not to do to her what her father did to her. This accusation enraged Polly's father, who nearly attacked Richard, but the people present compartmented him. Richard's words shocked everyone, not only because he didn't apologize but also because they doubted the truth of his claim about Polly's father. On June 18, 1996, Richard Allen Davis was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Polly Klaas. In August, he was sentenced to death. He tried to overturn the death sentence but failed. In 2006, Richard overdosed on pills in his cell but was revived and returned to prison. In 2009, his lawyer attempted to appeal his conviction to the Supreme Court but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court upheld his death sentence. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Celia Barquin. Celia Barquin was born on July 6, 1996, in Point San Miguel, a village in Cantabria, northern Spain, where her family has lived for 8 generations. She then moved to Iowa on an athletic golf scholarship. Many universities offered her scholarships due to her talent, but she chose Ames, Iowa. With a population of 65,000, Ames was quiet and cozy, reminding her of her hometown in Spain. However, at that time, she did not expect that this decision would be a serious mistake. Celia has a wonderful relationship with her family, who remained in her homeland. Her parents, Maria Rosa and Marcos Barquin, had 2 children, Celia and Andres. Marcos worked as a butcher, and Maria was a saleswoman at a clothing store. However, after their children were born, Maria became a housewife, focusing on raising the children and managing household tasks. The family was not wealthy, they lived modestly but were close-knit and supportive. Their children are their top priority, and their parents did everything to ensure that their children receive a good education and started their lives on the right path. Andres pursued a law degree, while Celia, a talented golfer, earned a scholarship to study in the United States. Celia's mother, who loved golf since childhood, passed on her passion for the sport to Celia. Being smaller than other girls her age, Celia learned to use specific techniques to win. When growing up, her petite figure enabled her to practice continuously to improve her abilities. Her dream was to become a successful professional golfer, not for fame, but to support her parents. Celia often expressed her desire to buy them a house and take care of them. To achieve this, she practiced diligently to improve her skills. Celia has achieved numerous titles and awards for her victories in various competitions. She won the European Women's Amateur Championship in Slovenia in June 2018, placed second in the women's team golf competition in Europe. Was the 2018 Big 12 Women's Golf Champion in the United States, and was named the 2018 Iowa State Athlete of the Year. There were high expectations for her, and many believed she had a bright future. When Celia moved to the United States, her relationship with her family remained strong. She talked to her parents daily, sometimes even 4 or 5 times a day when she had free time. Celia missed her family a lot. A nightly call to say goodnight and share the day's successes was a cherished routine. During vacations, she visited her family in Spain. Even while on vacation, she continued to train hard to improve her skills. Her mother supported her passion and often trained with her. Celia was comfortably settled in Iowa, living with her boyfriend, Carlos Nigri Nabeles, in a rented apartment. When Celia and Carlos met at the university, she was dating someone else, but Carlos fell in love with her at first sight. Her charming smile, piercing gaze, cheerfulness, and kindness captured his heart. And her determination and perseverance earned his deep respect. Although Carlos had to accept that she was with someone else, but he became her best friend and consistently supported her. For over a year, he stood by her side, then she became disillusioned with her boyfriend and broke up with him. After another walk together, Carlos finally confessed his feelings, and Celia pulled him by the shirt, kissed him, and without saying a word, left in a car. He was so happy she felt the same way that he ran around his room shouting with joy. That's how their romance started. To celebrate the beginning of their relationship, Carlos even set off fireworks to impress her and sent her a video where he told her she was amazing and 1 in a million. From then on, they were inseparable, and over time, they moved in together and started living together. Lately, their conversations were filled with dreams about their wedding venue and even the names of their future children. They were already engaged and planning the most important event of their lives for May 2017. Carlos had graduated from college and secured a job at an engineering firm in Ames. Celia was in her final semester at Iowa State University, also majoring in civil engineering. After completing her athletic career, she aspired to become an engineer and make a positive impact on people, wanting to demonstrate that women can succeed in construction as well. Celia excelled in her studies and successfully showed that women can thrive in this field. Celia had many friends and enjoyed surprising them with delicious Spanish dishes that she cooked very well. Among the university students, a popular video showed her skillfully tossing a Spanish omelet, flipping it in the air, and adding butter to make it burst like a fireball. Her friends loved this performance and often asked her to repeat it. In the summer of 2018, Celia spent her time in Spain with her family before returning to Iowa to graduate. She was a promising athlete on the Iowa State women's golf team and also competed individually. She was preparing for an upcoming competition. But unfortunately, those plans did not materialize. Celia's assassin has been following her and he has also planned an attack. On the ill-fated day of September 17, 2018, Celia arrived at the golf club after finishing a conversation with her mother. The staff, familiar with she, informed her that a group of 15 older men from Des Moines would also be playing golf. At 8:45, the group was sent to the starting line near the first 4 holes. Celia watched them arrive in golf carts and start playing. The retirees invited her to go ahead and start her game. Celia pushed the golf club to the first hole and then moved to the 4th hole to avoid delaying the older men. The seniors described her as polite and friendly. She then proceeded to the 7th hole, which was unpopular due to its distance from the other holes and its location next to Squaw Creek Park, known for dense vegetation. Athletes often avoided this area because it was sometimes frequented by unauthorized park visitors and aggressive homeless people. However, Celia was not familiar with this club and unaware of its thing, so she went there. To reach the 9th hole, players must cross a bridge along a wide path and then pass through a wooded area. One coach described this area as eerie, likening it to Sleepy Hollow. Celia went in that direction. Later, at around 10:30 a.m., a group of 15 people arrived in the area and found Celia's golf stick with her belongings, but Celia was not there. While the group played, they noticed that Celia hadn't appeared even after 10 minutes, which was unusual. Concerned, they decided to approach Celia's golf stick and look for her. Upon closer inspection, they found her t-shirt, baseball cap, and other items scattered on the ground, with her phone left. While it seemed some items might have accidentally fallen from her pocket, the presence of her t-shirt and the abandoned phone was puzzling. They searched the surrounding area but did not find anyone. Subsequently, they notified the club management to report this troubling discovery. The group reported seeing a young, blonde girl playing golf earlier, but now she was missing, and her belongings were left behind. The staff who arrived recognized her as Celia and began searching for her. In less than half an hour, they found a body floating in the pond near the 9th hole and called the police. Once the body was retrieved from the water, police identified her as Celia Barquin, the reigning European champion. She had been stabbed multiple times in the neck and torso. A search dog quickly picked up a scent and led officers to a tent in a wooded area of Squaw Creek Park. The tent was empty, but there was blood inside. The police suspected that a homeless man had been living there and might have attacked Celia, so they began searching for him. While the police were searching the area, a man approached them. He introduced himself as Colin Richards and mentioned that he lived nearby and was there to collect his tent. Colin, like Celia, was 22 years old, but they were complete opposites. The police suspected him of the murder because his face was covered in scratches. In a black backpack he carried, they discovered bloody clothes, a t-shirt and shorts, which he had replaced with clean ones. Search dogs also detected his scent. Additionally, He had a deep gash on his left arm, from which blood was oozing, and he attempted to conceal it from the officers. Based on this evidence, Colin Richards was taken into custody by the police. He was at a friend's house before the police arrived, according to Colin. Two male acquaintances took him to the park to get his tent. When he went to retrieve it, he saw the police. He denied any involvement in the crime and claimed he had never met Celia. He said the scratches on his face were from branches he encountered while walking through the woods. Colin was known to the police for substance abuse, alcohol issues, and mental health problems. He became homeless after being released from prison 3 months before the murder. He had served about 7 months in jail for burglary and had multiple prior convictions for similar offenses, with many criminal records. Colin grew up in a dysfunctional family and was known to the police since his teenage years. Detectives interviewed 3 men who were acquaintances of his. One of these men shared a tent with Colin, while the other 2 gave him a ride from his home to the park. The homeowner allowed Colin to wash and change his clothes because he was dirty and covered in mud, blood, sand, and water. After cleaning up and changing his clothes, Colin left with his bloody clothes in a black backpack to return to the park for his tent. He intended to leave the area afterward. According to the men, Colin was acting unusual that day, extremely nervous, and very to leave. He didn't explain his sudden decision, only mentioning that he had cut himself badly and dirted his clothes. Another homeless man who lived with Colin in a tent at the park mentioned that he always carried a serrated knife, which he used for household tasks. A day before the murder, Colin confessed to this friend his desire to rape and kill someone. But that man thought he was just joking. Colin was charged with first-degree murder right after Celia's body was found. Investigators believed the crime was premeditated. They thought he had planned to kill someone and was looking for a she that day. The judge set bail at $5 million, but Colin, of course, didn't have that kind of money, so he remained in custody until his trial. Meanwhile, Celia's family in Spain had no idea about these tragic incidents, but they were very worried because she hadn't called them or answered their calls and messages. Police aides tried to contact their colleagues in Point San Miguel and the embassy staff in Madrid to inform Celia's family about the terrible news, but it was already past midnight in Spain and no one was working. Therefore, Celia's coach had to call her parents to inform them of their daughter's incident. After many hours of not hearing from Celia, the parents learned that their daughter had been brutally murdered. Later, a serrated knife was discovered in a wooded area, bearing the fingerprints and DNA of Colin. Furthermore, the blood found under Celia's fingernails contained fragments of Colin's skin, confirming that these Colin scratches were caused by Celia, not by branches. Initially, he denied his guilt, but eventually, overwhelmed by the evidence, he confessed. He admitted to using substances that day and not thinking clearly. He saw a beautiful young woman alone in the woods and decided she would be the perfect target. Colin had never met or known Celia before, and she was an unintended victim of his violent outburst. Since the death penalty has been abolished in Iowa since 1965, he faced a maximum sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Colin's family attended the trial and shared details about his upbringing. His parents were never married or living together when he was born. For the first 10 years of his life, Colin lived with his father, who was strict with him. His father often sent him to bed alone while he went out to the bar. During this time, only Colin's grandparents looked after him. Later, his mother fought for custody and took Colin to live with her. By then, she had remarried and had 2 more children. They moved to the countryside, believing it was more peaceful. The family maintained strict discipline, and Colin's room was so tidy that they joked he should join the army. Colin was a diligent student, but as a teenager, he grew close to his alcoholic father and began having behavioral issues. His father attempted to discipline him, but Colin didn't listen, leading to his expulsion from the house at age 15. He fell in with a bad crowd, left school, and became addicted to alcohol and drugs. At 18, Colin had a girlfriend twice his age. In May 2015, he was arrested for domestic violence against her, found guilty, and sentenced to 60 days in jail. On another occasion, after being accused of shoplifting, he threatened to return and shoot up the place. Colin's life went out of control, but no one seemed to notice. After the domestic violence case, he was arrested multiple times over the next 2 years for theft, assault, harassment, and attempted burglary. Although he was sent to behavioral intervention courses, they didn't work. In November 2017, Colin was sentenced to 2 years at Mount Pleasant Correctional Facility for burglary in violating probation. Despite having disciplinary issues, including fights with other inmates, he was released on parole after just 7 months in June 2018 due to overcrowding in the prison. Only 3 months after his release, he killed Celia. After being released from prison, Colin was taken home by his mother and stepfather and lived with them. They had reconnected with him during his time in prison through letters. His parents trusted him and gave him an opportunity for a fresh start, believing his promise to avoid drugs and cut ties with bad influences. However, just 2 weeks later, they had to ask him to leave for breaking his promise. Colin then went to Ames, about an hour away from his home. He stayed briefly at the city's only homeless shelter, but there were not enough beds available. Seeking assistance from his mother, she bought him a tent. In his new city, the Ames Police Department soon noticed him. On June 29th, he was arrested for public intoxication. On August 11th, the police received a complaint from a Target store saying that Colin and another homeless man were camping on open land behind the store and were chased away. They then moved to camp in Squaw Creek Park to avoid bothering anyone. According to Colin, the police allowed them to camp there, but police representatives deny this, stating that camping overnight in the park is prohibited. On September 2nd, 15 days before Celia's murder, police were called to a Burger King where Colin threatened customers with a knife but was later released. On September 8th, his mother and stepfather visited to celebrate Colin's 22nd birthday. They took him out for dinner and to a laundromat to wash his clothes. His mother was concerned about his behavior. Colin was quiet and distant, responding to their questions with only one-word answers. They dropped him off at a tent in the park where he was living with another homeless man and then drove home. It was then that Colin confessed to his friend that he wanted to rape and kill a woman. The next morning, Celia was found dead, but she had not been raped. According to the police, he probably didn't have time to commit the act. Colin's parents said it was his own fault. They tried to help him, but it didn't work. He still chose to side with evil. Therefore, on August 23, 2019, Colin Richards was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He is currently serving his sentence at the Story County Jail in Nevada, Iowa. The whole town of Ames mourned Celia's death, with thousands attending a candlelight ceremony to honor she, the talented athlete. Celia's family was devastated by the news of her murder. They were furious that someone with no achievements or aspirations had cruelly taken the life of a talented and promising athlete with a bright future. Collins clearly had no regard for Celia's life. He randomly chose and killed her simply because he felt like it, believing she was an easy target. The Celia family was relieved by the verdict and grateful that the culprit was swiftly caught and could no longer pose a threat to anyone else. Now, he will remain imprisoned forever. Their only regret is allowing their daughter to go so far away, despite it being her dream. Statistically, the U.S. is not safe. The murder rate per capita in the U.S. is 26 times higher than in Spain. In their small town in Spain, there hasn't been a murder in 100 years. Celia's parents have kept her room just as she left it, with one addition: an engineering degree awarded posthumously by the state of Iowa. They often walk through the local golf club and remember when their daughter first started playing the sport there. The community in the small town of Ames, including the university administration and students, was outraged by the crime. The situation was particularly concerning because the golf course was next to a wooded area without any fencing. Due to the golf club's negligence, a girl's life was put in danger. This wasn't the first murder in the neighborhood. Back in 2008, a man was killed in a stabbing incident, and the homeless attacker was convicted of murder. After Celia's tragic death, her boyfriend Carlos found it too painful to stay in a town full of memories of her. He then moved to Florida. Celia's brother was greatly affected by her death, losing a lot of weight from stress. He decided to join the police force after earning a law degree, aiming to help others. This career choice was inspired by his sister, who encouraged him to find his purpose.
Hello everyone. Today, we will learn about another case. The case of Chelsea Bruck. A party for 1,000 people seems like the perfect place to enjoy the festive atmosphere and have fun. However, horrors sometimes lurk just outside, bringing with them unsolved mysteries and hauntings. Chelsea Bruck was born in 1992 in Trenton, Michigan, USA. Her mother, Leanda, worked at a bank, while her father, Matthew, was a farmer. She is the youngest of 5 children. Chelsea has 3 older sisters, Jennifer, Megan, and Cassandra, and a brother named Nathaniel. She is especially close to Cassandra, who is only 2 years older than she is. But all of her siblings share a close and loving relationship. Chelsea's family exemplified a typical American household. They lived in a small town with a population of about 500 people, where everyone knew each other and crime rates were very low. Growing up on a 65-acre farm established in 1875 by her great-grandfather, Chelsea was raised in a supportive, religious environment with strong moral values. Her family also had been involved in agriculture for 4 generations. Chelsea attended a Christian school, where she spent her free time studying Catholic scriptures. Later, she transferred to Monroe Secondary School, which focused on sports, cheerleading, and football. After finishing her education, Chelsea continued to live on the farm with her parents and her sister, Cassandra. During this time, her older sisters got married and moved out. Chelsea had a passion for cooking and intended to attend culinary school to become a chef to gain experience. She took a job at a nearby restaurant called Olga's Kitchen, where she worked as an administrator and felt very happy in her role. Chelsea was a friendly, sociable, and attractive young woman. She loved to express her individuality, often dyeing her hair bright colors like pink and getting a small anchor tattoo behind her ear. When grown up, she maintained a close relationship with her parents. She didn't have a driver's license and wasn't particularly interested in getting one, as her parents always helped her with transportation. By the time she turned 22, she had worked for 4 years and developed a close circle of friends with whom she regularly connected. Chelsea loved going to parties, and one of her favorites was a rock concert organized by a local musician named Mike on his farm. Over the years, what started as a small gathering grew into a well-known event, attracting around 1,000 people, including attendees from neighboring states. Mike had his own band and also invited other local performers. This year, the concert was themed for Halloween and scheduled for October 25, 2014. In Newport, Michigan, which is about half an hour from Ferndale, Chelsea was excited about this big event and planned to attend with her friends Becky Brinson and Laura Taylor. At the event, Chelsea and her friends planned to dress as Poison Ivy from the Batman universe. Chelsea created the costume herself, using a swimsuit as the base and adding various details. After many nights of hard work, the final result was impressive. She crafted a costume that looked original and was worthy of first place. On Saturday, October 25, 2014, the friends gathered for the party. Laura drove them to the party, and they decided not to go home right after the event. Chelsea, now 22 years old. She intended to spend the night at Laura's place. She packed her things and set out for a fun evening. She plans to arrive at the concert around 10 p.m. However, it was still early, and the event had not yet started. Preparations were still in progress, but already hundreds of guests had gathered. Eager for a large-scale party, everything seemed well organized. There were several food and drink vendors, security guards, ensuring safety, and parking appeared secure. The girls, who had attended this event before, could not have imagined that this time it would turn into a nightmare. After parking the car, they walked toward the concert venue. Since Chelsea's costume had no pockets, she had to leave her mobile phone in the car to avoid losing it. Nearly 1,000 people attended the event, many dressed in elaborate costumes. Alcohol was abundant, and some attendees were under the influence of illegal substances. These things created a lively atmosphere. Most of the people were unknown to the girls, who had gathered from different cities, but there were several familiar faces. Penny and her sister Heather. The group had a strong bond, having known each other for many years, even though Penny was 10 years older than Chelsea and had her own children. They all felt the energy of the event and enjoyed it. When the rock concert finally began, everyone reveled in the loud music. Chelsea and her friends quickly immersed themselves in the lively atmosphere. They happily drank and danced with everyone. However, because they were too excited to play, Chelsea and her friends lost each other. The situation was further complicated because all the girls were tipsy and disoriented by the noise and chaos of the party, making it hard for them to keep track of everything. Laura tried to locate her friend but was unsuccessful. Becky and Laura weren't overly concerned because there were many acquaintances at the party. They assumed Chelsea was with someone from her circle and would get a ride home later. Around 1 a.m. on October 26, Laura decided to leave the party and go home, unable to find Chelsea in the crowd. Laura gave Chelsea's personal belongings to Becky and asked permission to leave first. Becky woke up early the next morning, aware that none of her friends had plans for that Sunday. They all assumed they would sleep off the effects of the night before. She tried to call Chelsea's mother to inform her that she had Chelsea's things but couldn't get through. She went about her day, and later in the evening, Chelsea's sister, Cassandra, messaged her to say that Chelsea still hadn't come home. Becky responded that she was spending the night at Laura's place. Everyone felt relieved, thinking Chelsea was safe. But when Chelsea still hadn't returned by Monday, it raised concern. Chelsea's relatives reached out to Laura, but they hadn't heard from Chelsea either. They began contacting all their friends who had attended and find that none of them had seen Chelsea since they lost track of each other that night. Chelsea hadn't communicated with anyone and don't post anything on social media, which heightened her family's concern. In a state of panic, they went to the Monroe County Police Station to report Chelsea missing. Initially, the police were reluctant to take the case because Chelsea was an adult, 22 years old, who had the right to make her own decisions, including leaving without informing her family. However, her relatives insisted that a search for Chelsea be initiated. Her mother feared that something terrible had happened to her. Immediately after that, detectives began looking into the circumstances surrounding Chelsea's disappearance and defined a search area between Newport and her family farm. As the search efforts continued, detectives sought the assistance of Mike, a rock performer and party organizer, and brought him in for questioning. He agreed to come to the police station to provide his account. Mike was not well acquainted with Chelsea and claimed he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. He did not arouse any suspicion, so he was allowed to go home. The detectives then spoke with the security guards who were present at the event. They stated that they hadn't noticed anything unusual. However, Chelsea's relatives suspected that Mike knew more than he was letting on, so they went directly to his house in search of information about their daughter. They intrusively entered his property, where the party had taken place, and began searching for clues themselves when tensions escalated quickly. Mike permitted law enforcement to enter his area, wanting to avoid any implication of wrongdoing despite the organized search. The authorities found nothing relevant to the investigation. There were no leads. The detectives continued to interview attendees of the Halloween party, but it proved challenging to gather information. As it was a costume event where everyone wore masks and consumed alcohol, these were young people eager to make a name for themselves as a result of their conversations with the party guests. The detectives received hundreds of conflicting statements. Many of these claims were difficult to verify and took a considerable amount of time to investigate. Most of the information turned out to be false, likely due to confusion among people, however. Some individuals seemed to purposely exaggerate their stories to gain attention. Some of the statements are completely absurd. One partygoer claimed that a girl could have been kidnapped for slavery, while another suggested that a satanic ritual was taking place. With the possibility of someone being burned alive, the case quickly gained widespread attention. Information, rumors, and falsehoods spread rapidly among local residents. The media was filled with alarming headlines, including wild speculations about victims of satanic rituals. This situation deeply affected the family of Chelsea and Mike, despite the outrageous nature of some claims. The police had to investigate all theories presented by the guests. They discovered that there had indeed been a fire near the stage, reaching heights of 15 to 20 meters. After examining the area, they confirmed that no human remains were found. Ruling out the possibility of ritual murder, the search lasted several days and involved many volunteers, but no evidence was discovered. The friends of Chelsea felt responsible for her disappearance since they had left her alone that night and hadn't begun searching for her earlier. They kept a close eye on her social media accounts, hoping to find clues about Chelsea's whereabouts since she was alone. Her boyfriend was not considered the main suspect, however. The police interviewed all the young men who had any connection to Chelsea in recent years, searched their cars, and collected DNA samples from those individuals. During this time, rock singer Mike allowed a command center for the search operation to be set up on his farm and supported the police in every way he could. He even provided a generator so the search team could have electricity. A tent camp was established for volunteers and those concerned about Chelsea's disappearance, including her family and friends. The search for Chelsea continued almost around the clock. But there was little progress, despite the warm welcome and extensive help Mike provided to the investigation. Detectives remained suspicious of him. This was mainly due to his reluctance to communicate, which led them to believe he was hiding something. However, it was understandable why he felt this way, given the intrusive nature of the police presence on his property. Ultimately, all of Mike's belongings were searched, but nothing incriminating was found. The police suspect him of involvement in the incident because, before, when the police arrived, Mike was tackled to the ground, and they even threatened to shoot his dog. The reason for this incident was that when the police arrived, they found Mike covered in blood. It was later revealed that he had gotten dirty while rescuing his dog, which had fallen into a trap and was badly injured. He had carried the animal out of the woods in his arms. Mike was primarily at fault for hosting a party without ensuring the safety of his guests. As a result, he faced criticism from Chelsea's family and the police. Detectives learned from Gavin Hewlett, who provided new details to the investigators. He mentioned that a girl in the poison ivy costume was also looking for her friends after she had gone missing. She approached other party guests, asking about Laura, but no one offered to help. Distressed, she started to cry, and Gavin offered her his cell phone around 1 a.m. Unfortunately, she was unable to reach anyone and only managed to borrow a small amount of money. Chelsea felt very sad about losing her friends and being left alone. She declined his offer for a ride. Witnesses from the party reported that Chelsea arrived at the parking lot but felt stranded. Her belongings, including her phone, were left in the car, leaving her unable to contact anyone or find her friends. Consequently, around 2:45 a.m., Chelsea walked onto the gravel road leading from the parking lot, hoping to find someone she knew for a ride home. Although several people offered her assistance, she chose to decline their help and continued walking alone. This was the last time anyone saw her alive. Many attendees recorded videos and took photos at the party. The police gathered all available materials from the partygoers and are now analyzing thousands of images and videos. Some witnesses mentioned a man selling t-shirts that night. They were searching for him not as a suspect, but as a potential witness who might have seen Chelsea. When officers located the t-shirt seller, he reported that he indeed saw a girl in a bright poison ivy costume. Making her hard to miss, he gave, to provide the police with some helpful information, that a man wearing a sweatshirt and hoodie approached Chelsea, and they engaged in conversation around 3 a.m. She left with him. Their interaction seemed friendly, and they did not hug or flirt. This man was captured on multiple security cameras in the area. Using these recordings and the account of the t-shirt vendor, a forensic artist created a sketch of the man who may have been the last person to see Chelsea alive. This sketch was released to the media, along with a reward for any information that could assist in solving the case. The reward fund gradually increased from $5,000 to $30,000. Leaflets were widely distributed, and Monroe County was filled with photographs of Chelsea by that time. Approximately 300 leaflets had been handed out. Every community had posters featuring her photo, and the leaflets were even included with pizza deliveries. The police station began receiving calls from local residents with tips. Many leads were reported. Data was analyzed, and around 1,000 interviews were conducted. But none of this resulted in significant progress. A breakthrough in the case occurred in 2015, just before the new year, when a woman named Cree Carr contacted the police department. She reported that her boyfriend had confessed to killing Chelsea. Cree had confronted her boyfriend, who threatened her with a knife, and during this confrontation, he revealed that it was the same knife he used to kill the girl in the poison ivy costume. She managed to escape from him as he intended to chase her and her child when knowing about the high-profile case of Chelsea's disappearance. Cree wanted to assist in the investigation. The police were suspecting that the caller might be seeking revenge. As similar cases had occurred in the past, however, they could not completely disregard her call, so they decided to investigate during their inquiries. They discovered that the report was false. Cree up being one of 2 people arrested by the police, evidence showed that she was indeed a former acquaintance of Chelsea. The second individual detained was Harlan, a 19-year-old who claimed he intervened in a situation where 2 men were harassing Chelsea. He said attempting to rescue her before she was pulled into the fields. Later, Harlan confessed that his story was fabricated, and then the police received another call on March 22, 2015. A woman was cleaning her yard after winter when she found a red leather shoe. Without thinking, she discarded it in a garbage bag. Later that evening, her husband noticed the shoe and inquired about it. She explained how she found it while cleaning. He suggested that the shoe might be linked to Chelsea's disappearance, as she had been last seen wearing red shoes. Their home was located 7 kilometers from the party. Police had previously searched this area multiple times, and the couple was shocked that the searchers had overlooked the distinctive red shoe. Confused by the situation, she contacted the police to report her discovery. When officers arrived, they examined the area and the shoe. They confirmed that it closely resembled one belonging to the missing Chelsea. However, they found nothing else nearby. It turned out that this area had not been thoroughly searched before. The searchers were pressed for time and could not conduct a proper investigation before winter set in, and the snow later covered any potential evidence. As a result, the search was essentially ineffective. Soon after, another significant find was made. On the 15th, Eric Kassap was collecting scrap metal with friends when he stumbled upon a red wig while sorting through some debris near the railroad tracks. This wig was identical to one Chelsea had worn on the night she disappeared. Initially, Eric did not contact the police. Although he was aware of the missing girl, he had not paid attention to her accessory. A week later, he saw another news report about the search for Chelsea wearing the same outfit and realized that his discovery might be more important than he had first thought. he began to suspect it could indeed be linked to her disappearance. Despite his initial hesitation, he did not report the discovery to the police right away because he was worried that his DNA might be on the costume. He eventually told his sister about the costume, and she insisted that he inform the police. A week later, Eric reported the items he had found to the sheriff's department. The police went to the location he specified and discovered a carnival costume and Chelsea's wig. As a result, Eric became the main suspect. He shared all the necessary information with the police, including his DNA samples, and maintained that he had never met Chelsea. The investigators pressed him for details, but he continued to deny any involvement. Eric agreed to take a polygraph test and passed it successfully. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the outfit. They found that the straps had been torn off, indicating that someone had forcibly removed them from the girl, and the leggings were completely ripped. A forensic analysis of the poison ivy suit revealed brown stains that resembled blood. Further testing confirmed that the stains were indeed blood and belonged to Chelsea. By that time, over 1 million flyers had been distributed, but there was still no significant progress in the case. On April 24, 2015, John Markin was preparing his 5-hectare plot, which was densely forested. For construction, this location was close to where Chelsea's clothes had been discovered and not far from the site of a nearby rock concert. During the construction work, a bulldozer became stuck in a muddy area when the driver got out to investigate. He observed what looked like a human skeleton. He alerted the other workers, who confirmed it was indeed a badly decomposed human body without a face. Construction was immediately halted, and the frightened workers contacted the police. The driver informed the dispatchers that he had found human remains. John suspected it might be Chelsea, who was the focus of an extensive search in the vicinity. A piece of the remain clothing had been found, and the remain had light hair. When police to arrive at the scene, where they discovered a remain hidden in the underbrush and covered with branches and leaves. Right away, they were sent for forensic examination, and dental records were used to identify the body as that of Chelsea. The forensic expert concluded that Chelsea suffered a brutal death. Her murder was particularly cruel. Her jaw was severely disfigured, literally broken in two, and the bones around her eyes and nose were crushed. Many of her teeth were also knocked out. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury from a strong blow with a blunt object. Additionally, evidence indicated that she had been abused before her death. DNA from the perpetrator was found on Chelsea's body and entered into the police database. But there were no matches. Due to the poor condition of the body, more information could not be obtained. Therefore, the investigation for some time reached a dead end until 2016. When a DNA match was found in the police database, it belonged to Daniel Clay from Monroe County. His DNA was included in the database due to issues related to child support. Daniel had a troubled childhood. His mother was incarcerated shortly after his birth, and he was raised by foster parents in a local orphanage. He later developed a substance abuse problem after failing to secure stable employment. One of his former girlfriends became pregnant, but he denied paternity and did not provide child support. Daniel had a history of criminal behavior, harassment of women, and banned substance trafficking. Yet for some reason, his DNA had not been collected for the police database until now. On July 22, 2016, the police were driving the guy, who tried to escape but was caught. Daniel was taken in for questioning. Initially, he thought the police were investigating him for child support issues, but the detectives quickly shifted the focus to Chelsea's murder. He admitted to being at that Halloween party, but said he left early and denied having any connection to Chelsea, claimed he had never seen her before. Of course, the police officer did not believe him, as posters of Chelsea were displayed everywhere, making it impossible for Daniel not to know about her disappearance. However, he could not explain how his DNA ended up on the clothes and body of Chelsea. Investigators started using more sophisticated techniques to gather information. They employed a good cop, bad cop approach, which led to changes in the suspect's story. He admitted that he had forgotten some details, but he claimed that at a party, he had intimate with an unknown girl. He described her as wearing some kind of suit and said he didn't get a good look at her. The suspect mentioned that he got into a car with her, and after their encounter, they parted ways. However, this statement is obtained because he mistakenly believed that male fluids were found on the remains. In fact, the police did not locate any such fluid, but they did find his skin cells on Chelsea's remains, and on the straps of the poison ivy suit, his DNA was also discovered on the leggings, which were torn along the seam. This evidence suggested that the act was not consensual, and the police had not informed him about any intimate contact with the victim. Only a small group of investigators was aware of this information. Daniel eventually admitted to the crime after the suspect changed his story multiple times. Initially, he completely denied knowing Chelsea and claimed he had not been with anyone that night. However, during another interrogation, his account shifted again. This time, Daniel stated that he did intimate with a girl he met while leaving the parking lot. She got into his car and started flirting with him, although he initially responded to her advances. He soon became aggressive during their encounter. She asked him to bite, hit, and strangle her. He complied and strangled her for several seconds. Afterward, he realized she was unresponsive despite his attempts to revive her. She had no pulse. In shock and panic, Daniel drove for about half an hour along forest roads, trying to figure out what to do. Eventually, he disposed of her body in a remote area near an abandoned site. He could not explain why her clothes were found far from the body. Overall, his story was seen as absurd and unbelievable. Leading no one to trust his account, Daniel created an elaborate web of lies that ultimately led the police to lose patience and charge him with the murder of Chelsea. He claimed her death was an accidental result of a moment of passion, insisting on his innocence until the end. However, the medical examiner contradicted his claims, stating that the actual cause of death was a blow to the head from a blunt object, exposing his entire narrative as false. Daniel's girlfriend testified in court, saying she had never seen any signs of cruelty in him and found it hard to believe he could commit such an act. Meanwhile, another woman revealed that Daniel had confessed to her about the murder. The prosecutor argued that, on the night of the incident, Daniel spotted Chelsea walking alone and defenseless. He deceived her into getting into his car, then abused and brutally beat her to death. They was unable to clarify why the girl's suit and wig were found in one location. One shoe was found in another, and her body was discovered in yet another place. There were many unanswered questions in this case, but the key point is that Chelsea's body was recovered and the perpetrator was apprehended. To counter Daniel's false testimony, a special dummy was used to demonstrate how someone could be strangled for a few seconds right in front of the jury. It was shown that his claim was false because, in reality, it takes more than 3 minutes of pressure on the neck to cause death, which left a strong impact on the jury. Additionally, the prosecutor reiterated the injuries inflicted on Chelsea by Daniel. The brutality of the killer was evident in the manner in which he caused these injuries. It became clear that such a heinous act could not have been committed by chance. Daniel was found guilty of both abuse and murder, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole, along with an additional 75 years for other acts of violence against women. Incredibly, Leanda surprisingly revealed in a media interview that she has forgiven her daughter's killer. She even gifted him a Bible, which he promised to keep. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Maria Lehner and Laura Dalton. There are individuals who can be described as true parasites, living off others for extended periods. They are cunning manipulators who constantly exploit their victims. Even more frighteningly, some do not hesitate to take their behavior to the extreme, committing crimes with unimaginable cruelty. On the evening of March 19, 1999, residents of an apartment complex near the Iowa City campus were alarmed by a strong smell of burning and smoke coming from one of the apartments. Some residents stepped outside and saw a fierce fire raging through the windows of a small apartment. They immediately called the fire department. When firefighters arrived on the scene, the fire had already spread, shattering windows and producing thick columns of black smoke. Despite their best efforts, extinguishing the fire proved difficult. Neighbors stated that the apartment was believed to be unoccupied. As the permanent residents were out of town, firefighters initially focused on fighting the fire from the outside before entering the building. Once inside, the smoke began to clear. A desolation scene unfolded. The entire apartment had been devastated. With furniture and belongings reduced to ashes, they found a body lying near the entrance to the hallway. More shockingly, a second body was found in a back room. Both bodies were burned beyond recognition. The first body, located near the door, was less severely burned and was identified as a young woman who appeared to have died from smoke inhalation while attempting to escape. The second body, lying on a bed in a back bedroom. With most of the flesh completely destroyed, it was impossible to identify the victims at the scene due to the severe burns. For this, an examination in the laboratory of forensic experts would be required. Police were quickly called in to investigate the cause of the fire and the deaths. Initial theories suggested that the victims may have succumbed to toxic fumes or suffered an accident, possibly caused by an unextinguished cigarette, since the apartment was a common rental for students during exam periods. Investigators also considered the possibility that the fire was linked to excessive drinking. However, what they uncovered next completely shifted the direction of the investigation. Among the ashes, firefighters found a few items that were surprisingly intact. Among these items, they discovered documents that could help identify the deceased. A driver's license was found in a purse belonging to one of the victims. Following an investigation, the forensic experts confirmed the identities of the victims in there. A victim was identified as 29-year-old Laura Dalton a few days before the fire. Laura had traveled to Iowa City to visit her cousin. Strangely, Laura neither owned nor rented the burned apartment, suggesting she had ended up there by chance. None of the neighbors recognized her. Laura had grown up in the area and lived with her parents before moving away as an adult. However, she often returned to her hometown to visit family and stayed for several days. Iowa City was her favorite place, where she enjoyed spending time not only with her relatives, but also with her friends. It was a charming town where most residents lived modest lives centered around education and part-time work. The second victim, Maria Lehner, was a 27-year-old woman. She came to this town on business. She lived in a rented apartment that was not the one involved in the fire. Maria, like Laura, had no known relationship or connection with the owners of the burned apartment. The next morning, Laura's cousin and Maria's mother went to the morgue to identify the bodies. However, the autopsy revealed a disturbing detail. Both victims had died before the fire started. Their lungs showed no signs of smoke or hot air inhalation, indicating they were not breathing when the fire consumed the apartment. Although the body was severely damaged, the forensic team quickly determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head, most likely from a construction tool. While inspecting the burned apartment, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be bloodstains and strands of hair. The police promptly began analyzing these as potential evidence. This evidence later confirmed their suspicions were right. A barbell was found in the apartment and identified as the murder weapon, as it contained traces of blood from both victims. During the apartment search, investigators also found an empty can, despite severe fire damage. Appeared to be a can typically used for storing and transporting fuel. Meanwhile, the owners of the apartment denied ever storing fuel in their home, so they determined it had been used shortly before the fire. Detectives concluded that the attacker had murdered Maria and Laura, poured gasoline from the can on their bodies and nearby furniture, and set the apartment on fire to destroy evidence. The presence of flammable substances made it clear that this was a deliberate and carefully planned double murder. However, proven facts, not assumptions, were needed to solve the case. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the scene. A cigarette butt was discovered near the bodies simultaneously. Forensic experts were in for a great surprise, as it turned out that traces of incipient decomposition were found on the bodies. This decomposition will take at least a day after death. No evidence suggested that the bodies had been moved to the apartment after the murders. Most likely, Maria and Laura were killed there, and their bodies were burned several days later. Through investigation, the investigators speculate that Laura was killed on the night between Wednesday and Thursday, and her body remained in the apartment. Maria was killed a day later. On the night between Thursday and Friday, this discovery shocked the police, as they had initially believed the arson was carried out immediately after the murders to destroy evidence. The most puzzling aspect was that Maria had been brought to the apartment where Laura's body had already been decomposing for a day. Laura's friends reported that the last time they saw her alive was on Wednesday evening. That night, the group of friends decided to spend the evening at a bar, and Laura joined them for a few hours. Everyone was having fun, drinking, and relaxing. They tried not to overindulge. During the evening, Laura met a young man who had been sitting at a nearby table for most of the night. As the group became more intoxicated, Laura and the man started talking. Witnesses later admitted they didn't pay much attention to him. The two quickly struck up a conversation, and after some time, the man suggested they go to another bar. Laura initially declined, but eventually agreed. After some persuasion, witnesses stated that this was the last time anyone saw Laura alive. She left with the man shortly before midnight, according to the autopsy report. She was killed not long after. The thing to do now is to find this strange man. Unfortunately, no one knew his name and could not really describe his appearance. The police needed at least some details to begin the investigation. Witnesses were thoroughly questioned to create a rough profile of the unknown man. He was described as tall, around 20 years old or slightly older. With brown hair, witnesses also noted his disheveled appearance. Laura's friends were unaware of what had happened to her. She didn't call them the next day, and she hadn't contacted anyone at all. Laura also failed to attend the group's next party, held at the same bar the following evening. This time, Laura's friend, Maria, was present at the party. Maria's body was also later found in the burned apartment, and it appears she was killed just one day after Laura. Strangely, witnesses reported an almost identical story about Laura. Maria had been drinking with friends, and she caught the attention of a similarly unkempt young man sitting at a nearby table. He appeared friendly and spent much of the evening trying to charm her. The man seemed skilled at gaining trust, easily convincing Maria to leave with him for another party. She failed to recognize the threat and trusted the persuasive stranger. The bar owner also noticed them as they left. He provided the investigative agency with a slightly more detailed description of the man the investigator were searching for. This helped detectives create a more accurate sketch, despite the limited information. But the investigation now had a lead. The police also identified his behavior pattern. He observed women in bars for extended periods, waiting until they were intoxicated enough to lower their guard before making his move. In addition, he had access to one of the rented apartments. Either using his own key or the trust of the landlords, the police interviewed everyone, including students, who might have had access to the burned apartment. However, most of them had moved out long ago and no longer had access. For a time, the investigation stalled. In addition to the help of forensic experts and laboratory tests, additional evidence is needed to advance the case. One of the key stages of the work was to conduct an analysis of the discovered empty can. The resulting picture was consistent with what is left by gasoline vapors. The empty can was clearly used to carry fuel, which was poured over the bodies. Among the other evidence found at the scene of the double murder was a matchbox with just one match missing. It appeared the perpetrator assumed the fire would destroy all evidence. However, the fire was extinguished before everything was consumed. Investigators concluded the match had been used to ignite the fire. Unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found on the matchbox, leaving it unusable for identifying the suspect. After unsuccessful attempts at investigation, the investigators returned to the scene to look for more clues. By that point, the apartment had been cleaned and organized, making it impossible to find any new evidence. Initially, they had photographs taken at the scene of the fire. In one of the photos, they noticed a pair of suspicious glasses. These glasses matched descriptions provided by witnesses who had seen strangers at the bar days before the fire. Although the glasses survived the fire, they were not listed among the collected evidence. Fortunately, the apartment owner had not discarded them and handed them over to the police. When detectives examined the glasses, they discovered they also did not belong to the former tenants. The most valuable evidence ended up in the hands of the investigators, which later allowed them to obtain a huge amount of valuable information about the criminal to prove his connection with the murders, that these were not ordinary glasses, but ones with special lenses that correct vision. They were checked to determine what vision deviation the criminal had. This helped the detectives narrow down their suspect and determine whether these were his glasses. After that, the police officers had enough evidence and testimony to approximately reconstruct the picture of what happened. They reviewed the chain of events that led to this tragic outcome several times. In the end, the most probable version was recognized as the following. Presumably, both girls died one day before the fire started. The cause of death for each was prolonged beating with a blunt object, likely a barbell. They received head injuries incompatible with life to get rid of traces of the crime. The attacker decided to set fire to the apartment along with the bodies. The attacker appeared to stage the scene to resemble a real-life event. He placed the second victim in the hallway, while the first victim was beaten to death in bed. Afterward, he brought a gas can of gasoline into the apartment and carefully poured it over the furniture, floor, walls, and the victims' bodies. However, his critical mistake was smoking during the process. At the crime scene, forensic experts discovered a cigarette that had been extinguished and was not destroyed by the fire. Initially, no traces of the killer were found on the cigarette. Based on the circumstances, it seems the attacker was bent over, smoking, and pouring gasoline. When the concentration of vapors increased, the cigarette ignited. The resulting flames struck the attacker in the face, causing him to drop his glasses. The glasses were found slightly melted. It being in a less damaged part of the apartment, it is likely that the cigarette ignited the gasoline, triggering a chain reaction. This forced the killer to abandon the gas can, glasses, and cigarette at the crime scene, and assuming they would be destroyed in the fire. However, these items became key evidence. After interviewing the owner of the burned apartment, it was revealed that several valuable items, including 2 expensive household appliances, were missing. The investigators suspected the attacker would try to sell the stolen items, so they focused on local pawn shops. As these are the quickest and easiest places to sell stolen goods, their efforts paid off when they identified a suspect. After speaking with the owner of the pawn shop closest to the burned apartment, the detectives obtained receipts for items matching the stolen goods. Selling property at a pawn shop requires presenting an ID and filling out paperwork, which meant the attacker couldn't avoid giving his real name. This is how the investigators came across John Lee Memmer. John was a 20-year-old unemployed man who was well known in the city since he was a regular at various parties. He knew where to get a free drink. He was a good conversationalist and was described as a quiet guy. John attended various events after moving to the city. He had been jobless for a long time and didn't have a permanent home. He relied on friends, particularly students, who let him stay in their rented apartments, allowing him to get by. It is important to note that his appearance matches the description of the suspect and also often wears glasses. When the police looked into John's background, they discovered He had previously been conditionally released early for theft and document forgery. Now, John, the main suspect, could face a real prison sentence due to repeated offenses. An investigation also began into his possible involvement in the double murder. Immediately after that, John was arrested, and during interrogation, the police noticed slight burns on his face, including a small burn on his nose. This detail reinforced the detective's suspicion of his involvement in the fire. John appeared nervous and often hesitated before answering their questions. When he realized he was a suspect in the arson and murders, he began changing his story, leading to numerous contradictions. He claimed that, on that night, he broke in and stole several household appliances, which he later pawned. However, he denied any involvement in the arson or the murders of Maria and Laura. Refused to accept those charges, John explained that he had been using the apartment with another homeless man. Because knowing the owners would be out of town for an extended period, he described the second homeless man as suspicious and potentially dangerous. But the investigation could not confirm that this person existed. It seemed likely that John had fabricated the story to shift the blame. The investigators was determined that just a few days after the discovery of the two bodies, John visited an optical store and ordered new glasses using an old prescription. The glasses found in the burnt apartment completely corresponded to the prescription for correcting John's vision. This didn't seem like a mere coincidence. John was unable to explain why his glasses were found in the burned apartment, claiming he had lost them a long time ago. Following this, forensic experts decided to analyze the cigarette butt found at the arson site, suspecting it might contain DNA evidence from the perpetrator. By this point, John had already provided the investigators with samples for analysis. The results revealed traces of saliva and skin on the cigarette butt, which were examined and matched to John's DNA. This breakthrough was achieved using advanced forensic methods introduced in the late 1990s, which had become widely used by police at the time. These things strongly linked John to the crime scene. Though not directly to the victims, John later changed his story, admitting that he had been in the apartment and had snuck in with another homeless person when the apartment renter was not home. He offered a plausible explanation for why his glasses and cigarettes were found there. The police also focused on other pieces of evidence, particularly a leather jacket belonging of Laura, which was found in the ashes. Investigators began searching for traces of DNA. Initially, the jacket was examined under ultraviolet light, but no traces were found. Then, a different method was used to search for fingerprints. The fingerprint on Laura's jacket was identified as John's, however. This alone did not confirm his involvement in the murder. Detectives also examined John's shoes and the clothes he wore on the days of the murders. On one of his shoes, they found two tiny droplets of blood, about the size of a match head. Forensic scientists analyzed the samples and determined that the blood belonged to Maria. It was clear that John had attempted to wash his clothes, but traces of blood remained. Now, the police obtained undeniable proof of his guilt. John was unable to explain how the victim's blood ended up on his shoes. This detail became clear evidence that he had been in contact with Maria around the time of her death. When confronted with the accusations and presented with the evidence, John changed his story yet again. This time, he claimed that he had invited Maria and Laura over. They had been intimate. Then he left first, however, due to the condition of the bodies. This claim couldn't be verified. Forensic experts found no indication of an intimate relationship prior to Maria and Laura deaths. His story was clearly false, and his shifting testimonies only deepened the investigators' mistrust. With all the evidence collected, the prosecutor's office pieced together the chain of events leading to the fire and the double murder. John had gained access to the apartment while the tenants were out of town. There were no signs of forced entry. This easy access to the home alarmed the tenant's owner and moved elsewhere. After meeting Maria and Laura at a nightclub, John waited until they were intoxicated and less alert. He then initiated friendly conversation, flirted, and used his charm to gain their trust. Eventually, he convinced they to go to this apartment. His intention was to pursue intimacy, but neither Laura nor Maria reciprocated his advances. This rejection infuriated him and caused him to lose control. In his anger, he attacked Maria and Laura with a barbell. The severe head injuries they sustained from the blows resulted in their deaths the following day. On Friday, John returned to the scene to destroy evidence and steal household appliances from the apartment to cover his tracks. He set a fire, but made several mistakes, leaving behind significant evidence at the crime scene. A few days later, John was tried on charges of first-degree murder and arson. The defense has stressed that John is not known for being aggressive, although he has a history of minor crimes. He has never physically harmed anyone. Besides, one key point the prosecution has highlighted is the tattoo of 2 teardrops near his eyes, a symbol commonly used in the criminal world to indicate murder. He got these tattoos before attending the trial. However, John claims that the tattoo were merely a tribute to 2 friends who died in a car accident. The prosecution presented a combination of circumstantial and direct evidence to build its case. As John has never confessed to his guilt, the overwhelming evidence convinced the jury that John was the perpetrator. As a result, John Lee Memmer was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. He's sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. After serving 10 years, John appealed, claiming that the public defenders had failed to do their job effectively. He argued that the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, and that his defense team had failed to adequately challenge it. The appeal was considered by the court. However, after a retrial, he was found guilty, and the sentence was upheld. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Miriam Bielte. Miriam Bielte grew up in Hildesheim, Germany, where she excelled in school. After completing her studies, she was accepted into the University of Hanover, where she studied mechanical engineering for 5 years and earned a master's degree immediately after graduation. She found a good job as an engineer at a small design company a few years later. In mid-2018, she changed jobs to work for a larger car manufacturer, where she took on the role of design engineer. In 2019, Miriam lived in her hometown of Hildesheim. She was not in a serious relationship, so she continued to live with her parents. She worked for an international company and frequently traveled abroad. At the end of March 2019, the company sent her on another business trip, this time to Southeast Asia to meet with some suppliers. Miriam took additional leave to combine work with vacation. Miriam decided to extend her stay in Thailand. She had heard about the beautiful beaches and rich history of the country and wanted to experience this beauty firsthand. After completing her business negotiations with the suppliers, she boarded a flight to Bangkok. Although traveling alone can be risky, Miriam is experienced and knows how to navigate a foreign country safely. She prioritized her safety during her short vacation by following some important rules, avoiding going out alone after dark, keeping her valuables safe, and always being wary of strangers. Unfortunately, we cannot predict other people's intentions, making it difficult to know whether they might cause us harm. Soon after arriving in Bangkok, she took a trip to Pattaya, located in the southeast of Thailand. Just off the coast was Koh Si Chang, an island she wanted to explore. On Sunday, April 7, 2019, at the age of 20, Miriam bought a ferry ticket to Koh Si Chang for a few hours, planning to return to Pattaya in the evening. Her simple goal was to enjoy fresh local seafood, visit some of the island's ancient temples, and soak up the seaside atmosphere. By noon, Miriam had arrived on the island. She quickly rented a motorbike, a common mode of transportation in Thailand. Using Google Maps, she planned her route and set off on her adventure. One of her destinations was a white stone temple located on a hilltop. The temple was famous for housing the footprint of the Buddha and was established by the ruling Chakri dynasty, making it important to Buddhists. The temple was tucked away in a quiet location. Miriam loved being in peaceful places, away from the hustle and bustle of tourists. She had no idea what awaited her there. After reaching her destination, Miriam parked her motorbike near the flower stall at the foot of the hill. She greeted the vendor and headed toward the temple. The hike ahead was challenging and best suited for those in good physical condition. Surveillance footage captured Miriam climbing the stone steps to the monument. However, Miriam ascended the steps but never returned. This was puzzling because the stone steps were the only way down the hill. Her rented motorbike remained parked at the foot of the hill, near the flower stall. Although the temple is situated on a beautiful hill, there are no other attractions nearby, making it unclear why she took so long and why she did not return. As night fell and she had not yet contacted anyone, her relatives in Germany began to worry that something might have happened to her. The next morning, April 8, a Thai tourist walked along a deserted path leading to the white stone temple that housed the footprint of the Buddha. About halfway up, he noticed a small ravine beside the stairs. Curious, he went closer and was shocked to discover the body of a young woman with fair skin. She was found dead, lying between two large boulders, covered in branches, leaves, and old debris. The visitor quickly alerted the police to the gruesome discovery. Officers rapidly climbed the hillside to the site where the body was discovered. The victim was identified as a German woman named Miriam Beelte. After examining the scene, police determined that her death was not an accident. Miriam was found with a broken leg and multiple injuries to her head and face, consistent with being struck by a heavy object, such as a brick or stone. It was tragic when it was discovered that Miriam had been abused before her death. However, the exact circumstances surrounding her death remain unclear. The stone shrine dedicated to the Buddha has only one entrance and exit, which was monitored by a surveillance camera that recorded Miriam as she climbed the hill. It was soon revealed that an unidentified young man had been seen going up the stairs with Miriam, making him the prime suspect. The police quickly identified him. Security footage showed him arriving on a motorbike and parking at the foot of the hill. He spoke briefly to the florist and bought a small bouquet of marigolds before heading to the temple. The florist noticed the young man closely following Miriam and then saw him walking down the stone stairs alone. He was wearing dark clothes, and the florist thought his jacket and pants looked wet and had something red on them. Concerned, the florist asked the young man if everything was okay. The man said he had just fallen, sensing something was wrong. The florist tried to recall the young man's appearance and noted down the model of his motorbike and the license plate number. The florist then shared his observations about the suspicious man with the police. The police discovered that the motorbike belonged to a 24-year-old man named Ranakorn Romruin, a local resident of Koh Sichang Island. Ranakorn lived alone and owned a small boat as well as a motorbike. He worked as a beach cleaner during the day, where he paddled around in the boat, collected trash, and cleaned the beach. Locals described him as a quiet and solitary man after work. Ranakorn would often go home, watch TV, and drink beer, leading a lifestyle similar to many other young people his age. However, few knew that he was struggling with serious personal problems. Ranakorn battled drug addiction and regularly used methamphetamine. The day after Miriam was murdered, Ranakorn was arrested as he returned home from work in the evening. He was taken to the police station for questioning, and a few hours later, he confessed to the crime. Ranakorn stated that on the morning of Sunday, April 7, he woke up, skipped breakfast, drank 2 beers. He then used methamphetamine and got on his motorbike to travel around the island. His trip ended at the foot of a temple. Ranakorn spotted Miriam as she was climbing the stone stairs. At that moment, an idea struck him when he saw an attractive girl with fair skin at the foot of the hill. He noticed a flower stall and bought a small bouquet of marigolds. Ronicorn then followed Miriam up the stairs. When he caught up with her, he tried to strike up a conversation. Miriam felt uncomfortable, and after he gave her the flowers, he suggested they could be intimate on the hill before going to the temple. Miriam refused, but Ronicorn continued to ask inappropriate questions. Miriam became frightened and tried to run away from the stranger, but he kept chasing her. Eventually, he grabbed her and dragged her into the dense forest. Miriam screamed and struggled to escape, but there was no one around to help her. After he completed what he intended to do, Miriam found an opportunity to escape. She ran down the hill, putting as much distance as possible between herself and him. Meanwhile, Ronicorn had a disturbing thought. He realized he needed to catch up with her to eliminate any possibility of being caught. If he let her go, he would likely end up in jail. Ronicorn stood up, dusted himself off, and ran after Miriam. Unfortunately, in her panic, while descending the hill, she fell and injured her leg. Ronicorn caught up to her and picked up a large rock from the ground. Hitting her on the head, Miriam died from the injury. Ronicorn then dragged her up the hill, placed her on a rocky spot, and covered her with leaves, twigs, and old rubbish. However, the body was eventually discovered by a Thai tourist after committing the crime. Ronicorn returned home, quickly washed his bloody clothes, lay down on the couch, watched TV, and finished a pack of cigarettes. This was his last evening of freedom during the reenactment of the crime scene. Ronicorn recounted the final moments of Miriam's life while his head was covered with a blue bag. To protect his identity, Thai police closely monitored the investigation, and just 3 months after the tragedy, the trial began. The main evidence against Ronicorn included surveillance camera footage, a witness's testimony from the flower stall, and Ronicorn's own confession. Although Ronicorn did not directly apologize for his actions, his mother did so in court on his behalf. The mother said that she and Ronicorn did not live together and were unaware of her son's actions. His actions shocked her, and she urged the court to impose the harshest sentence on him. In Thailand, the maximum penalty for murder is the death penalty. Ronicorn's mother feared that if he were released, he might commit a similar crime and take the lives of others. She supported the court in imposing the death penalty on her son. Ronicorn is currently awaiting execution. The island community was horrified by the news of the death of 26-year-old Miriam. Thailand is generally a peaceful country, and it is sad that a local man would treat a tourist so cruelly. Koh Si Chang has never seen such brutality before, and the residents hope this incident will not disrupt their lives or deter visitors. The Koh Si Chang community came together to express their grief. People of all ages and occupations gathered at the site of Miriam's death. Carrying candles and flowers, they mourned, prayed for her soul, and offered their condolences to her family. Thailand's economy is heavily dependent on tourism, and negative publicity can be very damaging to the country's economy. This is why the Thai authorities prioritize the swift resolution of crimes involving tourists. However, there are times when details of such cases are kept under wraps and not shared with the public. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kirk Langford. Masumi was born in the Japanese town of Sado to parents Hichi and Fiko. She has 2 older brothers, Kenya and Rio. Masumi grew up in a loving and supportive family, did well in school, earned good grades, and was well behaved. In her 20s, Masumi visited Hawaii for the first time with her family and immediately fell in love with the island after returning home. She decided to visit again the following year. In 2007, although her parents were initially reluctant to let her travel alone due to safety concerns, They eventually realized how important the trip was to her and agreed to her plan. At the age of 21, Masumi packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and boarded a plane to Hawaii. She planned to stay for about 2 months and wanted to make the most of her time there. Her goals included improving her English and volunteering at Sunset Beach Elementary School, located nearby on the island of Oahu. During her time there, Masumi also enjoyed reading and studying history at the local library. Masumi was quite petite, and due to her astigmatism, she had to wear special glasses. She was a kind and somewhat naive girl, which could have made her an easy target for criminals. However, she did not feel any danger. Instead, she felt extremely comfortable living in Hawaii. As the weeks passed, Masumi's trip was filled with unforgettable joy. However, her vacation was coming to an end while she looked forward to reuniting with her loved ones. She also realized how much she would miss this sunny paradise and how long she would have to wait until her next visit on April 12, 2007, around 9:30 a.m. One of Masumi's friends dropped her off at the end of the road. And, as usual, Masumi decided to go for a walk. The area was not too isolated, so she felt safe. She walked along the road toward the home of her family friend, Yumi, with still half a mile to go. After 2 hours had passed without Masumi returning to house, Yumi's family began to worry. Yumi and her husband went looking for Masumi, but after searching the entire road without finding her, they felt that something was wrong. The couple called the police to report Masumi missing. The news quickly spread across the islands, and eventually, family friends notified Masumi's parents in Japan. Local residents soon organized a search effort. Masumi's small stature and limited English skills make her stand out, but they also make her more vulnerable to danger. The investigation began at the house where she was staying. Although nothing suspicious was found, experts collected DNA samples as a precaution. No clues were discovered. Her suitcase and plane ticket back to Japan were found on the table. As news of Masumi's disappearance spread, many people came to the police station with potential information about her whereabouts. A local resident provided a crucial piece of information, reporting that she had seen a young woman matching Masumi's description that morning. A man had tried to persuade her to get into a truck, but she repeatedly refused. The witness also recalled that the truck was white, which became a key detail in the investigation. Witnesses began searching the area for white trucks and checked the island's vehicle database. During this process, a second witness provided a similar account, adding that the truck had a company logo on its body. Fortunately, the man even remembered the name, Hawaii Pest Control. This information significantly narrowed the search area. Police then identified the suspect as Kirk Langford, a technician for Hawaii Pest Control. He was born in 1985 and grew up on the island of Oahu. A neighbor mentioned that the Langfords had moved to the area about a year and a half ago, and that they generally received positive reviews. They were described as friendly and religious. Kirk and his pregnant girlfriend led a quiet life. They had a young son and were expecting a second child. Kirk was known as a kind and gentle man who hosted charity Bible studies at his home, and his family regularly attended church. He was considered a trustworthy and moral person. Therefore, when rumors of his involvement in Masumi's kidnapping arose, many found it hard to believe. Kirk himself repeatedly stated that he knew nothing about Masumi's disappearance and had no involvement in the incident. However, he admitted that he was in the area the morning of her disappearance and was driving a white truck at a certain time. He claimed that this was just a coincidence and suggested that witnesses may have been mistaken. There was not enough evidence to arrest him, so the police eventually released him but left their contact information, asking him to call if he remembered anything else. In the days that followed, the police discovered that Kirk owned another white truck, a Ford F-150. They examined Masumi's belongings, such as her toothbrush and a spare pair of glasses, to create a DNA profile for her. Over time, it became increasingly clear that Kirk was directly involved in the kidnapping.
making it highly unlikely that Masumi had run away from home. One day, a homeless man came to the police and shared that, while he was walking, he noticed a man digging near a parked white truck. When the homeless man asked what the man was doing, he replied that he was looking for a lost necklace, which seemed suspicious. The homeless man wrote down the truck's license plate number. After an investigation, it was confirmed that the license plate number belonged to Kirk's white Ford F-150. The police had two key pieces of information. A witness saw Kirk's truck near Masumi, and another witness confirmed that Kirk was digging near his car. However, this information alone was not strong enough to obtain a search warrant. Nevertheless, because Kirk had an outstanding traffic ticket, the police were permitted to seize both vehicles for a detailed examination. They also summoned Kirk for questioning, but he refused to answer any questions without a lawyer present. He subsequently took a polygraph test, which he failed. Fortunately for him, polygraph results are not legally admissible in court. The police understood that their best chance of arresting Kirk was to obtain a positive DNA match from his truck and Masumi's belongings. Unfortunately, the processing of the DNA samples took too long, compelling the police to release him. Ultimately, the police found key evidence inside Kirk's work truck. They discovered blood and glasses on the upholstery. A few days later, tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Masumi Watanabe, and the glasses found in the truck matched hers exactly. At this point, Masumi's case shifted from being classified as a missing persons case to a murder investigation. Kirk was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During a subsequent interrogation, he changed his story, claiming that he had actually seen Masumi on the day of the incident. In this new account, he stated that he had accidentally hit her with his car, causing only minor injuries. He claimed he attempted to take her to the hospital, and she reportedly agreed. However, after driving a short distance, she suddenly jumped out of the truck. The car was traveling at over 40 miles per hour, resulting in Masumi hitting her head upon impact. Kirk attributed her strange behavior to their lack of communication. Citing her poor English as a contributing factor, he confessed that Masumi had been severely injured and died instantly after jumping from the vehicle, instead of calling the police. He hid her body in the back of his truck that evening. Kirk cleaned out the truck and returned home to have dinner with his wife and children. He then went to a store to make a purchase. Surveillance cameras recorded him at two stores buying gloves, a shovel, chlorine-based cleaner, and trash bags. He then transferred the body from the company truck to his own vehicle and drove out into the countryside. There, a homeless man saw him digging, supposedly looking for a necklace, but in reality, he was digging a grave to bury Masumi. When Kirk was discovered by the homeless man, he panicked. Instead of burying Masumi, as he had initially planned, he threw her body into the ocean. He later explained that he lied to the police because he was afraid of losing his job. In an interview, Kirk's live-in girlfriend mentioned that, after dinner on April 12, Kirk went out to work, and when he returned home, she noticed some stains on his clothes. Interestingly, Kirk's girlfriend later recanted her statement. However, the police returned to the burial site but found no evidence. Kirk's claim that he had abandoned his plan to bury the body there turned out to be correct, and, unfortunately, Masumi's body was never found. There was sufficient evidence to convict Kirk, including the testimony of several witnesses, a DNA match linking Masumi to Kirk's belongings, and Kirk's own statements. However, since there was no evidence of intentional conduct, it was challenging to charge him with first-degree murder. As a result, prosecutors decided to charge him with second-degree murder on March 4, 2008, nearly a year after Masumi's disappearance. The trial began. Kirk maintained that the incident was accidental, arguing that Masumi had jumped out of the moving truck on her own and that he was not responsible for her death. Kirk's parents attended the trial and insisted that their son was a good person who could never commit murder. They argued that he was the victim of a plot by the police. The prosecution believed that although Kirk had not planned the kidnapping or murder in advance,
They also rejected his claim that the incident was accidental. Experts pointed out that if Kirk had actually hit Masumi with his car, his vehicle would have been damaged. However, upon examination, no such damage was found on the truck. Furthermore, the injuries the girl sustained must have been much more severe than Kirk described, making his entire testimony seem implausible. The police and Masumi's family believed that Kirk had buried her body nearby instead of throwing it into the sea. However, in court, Kirk insisted that he had thrown her body into the ocean. The police contended that if the body had indeed been thrown into the ocean, the tide would eventually wash it ashore, as they had seen in similar cases. Because Masumi's body was never found, the police could not determine the cause of her death or whether she had been abused. Masumi's parents attended the trial. At one point, Kirk told them that he had not tortured Masumi. However, her parents, like the prosecutors, did not believe him. Masumi's father stated that every night he heard Masumi's voice, calling for him to take her home. Masumi's mother expressed that the family would not find peace until they could bring their beloved daughter back to Japan and give her a proper burial. After reviewing the evidence presented in court, the jury deliberated for a day and a half. Ultimately, Kirk Langford was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. This is one of the longest sentences in Hawaiian history. Kirk's appeal was denied. It is hard to describe the depth of pain her family and friends must have felt. Losing a child is one of the hardest experiences for any parent, especially when they cannot even lay their daughter to rest. Masumi was a shy, gentle girl with her whole life ahead of her. She was drawn to the Hawaiian Islands and loved them dearly. Tragically, what was once a true paradise for Masumi became her final resting place. After the verdict, Masumi's mother made an emotional plea. She bowed humbly before the court and begged Kirk to show them where the body was buried. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Norberto Ronquillo. In 2019, Norberto Ronquillo, a 22-year-old Mexican student, was kidnapped by unidentified men shortly after leaving college. He had just completed his final semester before graduating. Norberto lived with his uncles in southern Mexico City, just a 15-minute walk from Pedregal University. On the evening of July 4, he left the university at 9 p.m. and texted his girlfriend to say he was coming home. A security camera recorded him leaving the building at around 9:30 p.m., but he disappeared afterward. The case attracted widespread attention in Mexico, and finding those responsible should have been easy. However, the mastermind managed to confuse the investigation, creating a bizarre story that captured the attention of many. Norberto was born in Meoki, Chihuahua. He was known for being very sociable and charming. He was always ready to help those in need and was well liked by many. Norberto's dream was to move to Mexico City to study marketing at Pedregal University after graduation. Upon arriving in the capital, he lived with his uncles, aunts, and cousins. By the age of 22, his life seemed to be in order. He was dating a girl. On July 4, 2019, Norberto left class at around 9:30 p.m. A surveillance camera recorded him leaving the university parking lot while calmly talking on the phone. Just 15 minutes after he left, his uncles and aunts received a call from his phone. But it was not Norberto on the other end of the line. Another voice informed them that their nephew was being held captive. The young uncle panicked and abruptly hung up. The kidnappers called back, but no one answered. Finally, Norberto's aunt picked up the phone and spoke to the criminals. Their message was clear: to see their nephew Norberto alive. His uncle's family needed to hand over 5 million pesos that night. At 10 p.m., the police received a report of a gray Toyota Yaris abandoned in the middle of the road. This was the same model that Norberto owned when the police arrived. They failed to secure the area for potential evidence and did not call in forensic experts to conduct a thorough investigation. This mishandling complicated the case. especially since the car was parked near Norberto's uncle's house, with the keys left on the sidewalk. When Norberto's cousin Osvaldo returned home, he saw the police nearby and informed them that the car belonged to his family. Unfortunately, the police carelessly returned the car to Osvaldo, who was unaware of the troubling events involving his family. At midnight, Osvaldo returned home and received shocking news. He quickly decided to take his father to the police to report the incident. 40 minutes later, the case was officially opened. Meanwhile, Norberto's aunt chose to handle things differently. At 1 a.m., she asked her husband and son to withdraw the complaint, claiming that she had made a deal with the kidnappers. She also negotiated the ransom down to 500 pesos and some jewelry. However, it was too late. The police had already begun their investigation. Meanwhile, the kidnappers made their demands. At 3:30 a.m., Osvaldo was ordered to pay the ransom for Norberto's safe return. They instructed Osvaldo to go to Las Bombas Street, stop at a car wash, collect the money, and throw it behind bars in an empty lot. Osvaldo carefully followed all the instructions. Then the kidnappers informed him that Norberto would be released at the Chalcocan Canal. Osvaldo waited there for hours, but Norberto never arrived. The kidnappers also stopped communicating, and there was no further contact. At 7 in the morning, Osvaldo decided to call the police, who quickly began searching for the missing person. On June 5, at 10 a.m., the Prosecutor General's office officially opened an investigation. Norberto's relatives were summoned to the Ministry of Defense to provide witness statements. Meanwhile, footage from city cameras was reviewed, but no useful information was found. Cameras that may have captured footage of Norberto's abandoned car were thoroughly examined. Unfortunately, they were pointed in the wrong direction. The only camera facing the right direction was broken. The family's desperation quickly spread throughout the country. On June 6th, Norberto did not return home, and news of his disappearance was widely reported. The university then helped raise awareness, leading to media coverage of the kidnapping. During his graduation ceremony, Norberto's classmates took the opportunity to rally support for the search. Dressed in caps and gowns, they displayed posters with Norberto's picture, which quickly attracted attention on social media. Norberto's mother traveled to the capital and appeared on several television shows. On June 8, a search was conducted in the areas where Norberto's car had been found. Unfortunately, this search did not uncover any new clues. The kidnappers did not contact anyone. As if they had disappeared, questions about Norberto's whereabouts continued to echo throughout the country for a long time. There was only silence, but that silence was finally broken. On June 9 at 6 p.m., the police received an anonymous tip about a body wrapped in a blanket that had been found in the Zumilco area. The police quickly arrived at the reported location. The area was deserted, with no surveillance cameras, suggesting that the perpetrators had planned the crime carefully. The police sent the body for an autopsy. On June 10, Norberto's family came to identify the body. His family confirmed that the body found was Norberto. The autopsy revealed that he had died of exhaustion, and there were signs of torture on his body, including a broken nasal septum. As the investigation continued, the case became increasingly puzzling. Forensic experts reported that the body could have been there for 3 to 5 days, suggesting that Norberto may have died on the day he was kidnapped. Despite attempts to negotiate a ransom with the family, the criminals had no plans to release Norberto. However, these are still just theories, as many uncertainties surrounding the case remain. Norberto's body was cremated, and after the funeral, he was flown back to his hometown. The university suspended all academic activities for 3 days. The investigation into his death continues. Norberto's mother has used social media to call for justice and urge safety measures for all young people to prevent tragedies like her son's from happening again. The first to face consequences was the police, who ignored Norberto's car, a potential piece of evidence. Traces of blood were later found inside the car, but were never tested. When Norberto's cousin Osvaldo got into the car to take it to the garage, he accidentally contaminated potential evidence, however. Osvaldo did not know that Norberto was missing at the time and only learned about it when he got home. Since then, the car has not been mentioned again. The Attorney General's office has analyzed more than 20 hours of video from 6 cameras, including state and private cameras. Located near the scene of the incident, it appears that the criminals used 2 cars to carry out the kidnapping. It was revealed that one of the cars was used to distract attention from the criminals and only intervened if any problems arose. The second car was used specifically for the purpose of kidnapping Norberto. The information gathered led to a 2-part investigation. First, it was assumed that the kidnapping was carried out by a Mexican organized crime group known to the media as the Skinheads. This group targeted students from private universities and high schools within a 10-kilometer radius of Xochimilco. One similarity with Norberto's case is that the gang had previously carried out 5 kidnappings, 3 of which resulted in the victims being killed even after their families had paid ransoms. Furthermore, records show that these victims usually died within the first 48 hours of their capture. However, there are some notable characteristics of skinhead gangs. They shave the victim's head before releasing or killing them. In Norberto's case, his head was not shaved, and there was no evidence that he was being held captive. Negotiations between criminal groups and families are common in these types of crimes. Considering this, the police formed a second hypothesis. The crime could have been committed by someone close to the Norberto. They decided to question Norberto's acquaintances. The Prosecutor General's office found it suspicious that the ransom was arranged so quickly, in just 20 minutes. And it was hard to believe that the criminals would agree to a discount for the family. It was also strange that Norberto's aunt refused to involve the police. Later, the police interviewed Norberto's girlfriend, aunt, uncle, cousins, and close friends. Finally, a breakthrough occurred. The police noticed that Euritzi's ex-boyfriend seemed to be interfering too much in Norberto and Euritzi's private lives. He often expressed dissatisfaction with their relationship, however. Euritzi and Norberto appeared to be a happy couple, regularly sharing photos of themselves together on social media. The day before Norberto went missing, his girlfriend Euritzi posted a tweet that appeared to be directed at her ex-boyfriend, urging him to stop interfering in her life and focus on his own. The Attorney General's office quickly launched an investigation into Euritzi's ex-boyfriend, but the investigation stalled when he could not be found. Finally, a crucial piece of evidence emerged that had previously been overlooked. The red plaid blanket that had been used to wrap Norberto's body had the name Hernandez embroidered on it, indicating that it belonged to a family with that surname. This raised suspicions about Norberto's maternal family. The Attorney General's office investigated 47 people with the surname Hernandez. Unfortunately, these investigations were fruitless and caused delays. Meanwhile, the most promising lead in the case came from surveillance cameras. When the police reviewed footage from a camera on Las Bombas Street, they saw a white van and a red sedan drive by at 3 a.m. shortly after Osvaldo delivered the ransom, with 3 people getting out of the vehicles. After receiving new information, the police were able to clarify some important details. They quickly identified the red sedan and its owner. This discovery led to several arrests. The first arrest was of Daniel, the owner of the red sedan. In his statement, Daniel explained that he used the car to transport passengers for a private company. He said that the person driving the car that night was actually his friend, Oscar. The police then went to Miguel Hidalgo to find Oscar. when Oscar was arrested. The police found packages containing illegal synthetic substances. They also learned that he had previously been involved in a criminal case, based on information provided by Daniel and Oscar. The police arrested Jose Fernando, who was also found to have illegal substances, on July 7, more than a month after Norberto's death. The preliminary results of the investigation were released to the public. Creating considerable interest, the police stated that one of the suspects was Daniel's cousin, but Daniel's father insisted that he had never heard of Norberto. This raised questions about how Daniel could have known Norberto and why he would plan to kill him. New evidence quickly emerged in the case to expedite the investigation. Oscar appeared in court a few days later and surprisingly confessed to being involved in the crime. They uncovered key details and identified a woman named Euritzi Martinez, Norberto's ex-lover, as the mastermind behind the crime. Euritzi met Norberto about 3 years ago, and they dated for a short time. Romantic photos and messages to her were found on Norberto's Facebook page, and his aunt confirmed their relationship. However, the motive behind Euritzi's involvement in the crime remains unclear. Euritzi asked for Norberto to be kidnapped because he owed her 700 pesos. They planned to demand 5 million pesos from his family after she received the money. The rest would be divided among the kidnappers. Euritzi claimed that Norberto's uncle and aunt owned shops in the Central Market, which would make it easier for them to collect the ransom. However, things quickly spiraled out of control, and Norberto was killed on the night of his kidnapping. The police promptly opened a case against Norberto's ex-girlfriend, Euritzi, until July 14. She was still active on social media after the arrest warrant for Euritzi was issued. She disappeared. She deleted her social media accounts and turned off her cell phone. A few days later, the investigation revealed that there was no debt between Norberto and Euritzi. It became clear that she only wanted to profit from Norberto's family. On July 28, 2019, Daniel and Oscar were arrested and taken into custody at a pre-trial detention facility. Initially, it seemed that the case was almost solved, with the only remaining task being to find Euritzi. However, during the investigation, the police discovered that Elvia, the owner of the house where Norberto had been held, was involved in the kidnapping. On September 21, Elvia was arrested for unlawful deprivation of liberty following her arrest. New details of the investigation emerged. It was revealed that Elvia was a witch and that the kidnappers had approached her to perform a ritual to assist in the kidnapping. Elvia had voluntarily joined the criminal group, motivated by the prospect of receiving a portion of the ransom. The final arrest in the case occurred on October 22. When the police apprehended Jose Fernando, they sought him for drug trafficking 3 days later. After being taken to prison, Jose was informed that he would also face charges for kidnapping Norberto. This indicated that the case was close to being resolved. However, the family could not achieve full justice because the main instigator, Euritzi Martinez, was still on the run. The Mexico City judiciary found Jose, Daniel, Elvia, and Oscar guilty of kidnapping and murdering Norberto Ronquillo. They were each sentenced to 140 years in prison and ordered to pay more than 1 million pesos in damages. 4 years after the case, Euritzi is still missing.